the sort of what precipitated me using Tumblr as a kid was like, part of it is that I was homeschooled and I spent a lot of time on the computer because I didn't have like maybe the same level of social interaction as a usual child might have. I did have friends. I was a Girl Scout when I was a kid, and there was this girl that I had been in Girl Scouts with, who I was good friends with, and who at the time I was like extremely in love with. And she was really into Tumblr, and so I was like, okay, I have to use this website. And it definitely took me a little while to get the hang of. And for a while, I was just like making posts about like random things that were happening in my life, like, oh man, they took down the tire swing at Oz Park. I was like 12, so this was still really relevant.
Everybody on Tumblr just like getting that tire swing hashtag going or
looks
whatever.
Like tire swing discourse is happening again.
There's a tall, gangly man hanging out by the tire swing. He's got tentacles
is this
wrapped
a Slender Man
around.
reference?
He's doing a Slender
I wasn't
Man
here
reference.
for it. I have thoughts on Slender Man.
AJ, what's that hat you're wearing?
Oh God. Oh, it's so.
It's almost like the hat is full of some kind of mysterious substance.
Who knows?
Anyway,
Who knows?
Yeah.
The goo.
When I did engage with other people who were like involved in like Tumblr fandom or like really deep into Tumblr culture, like I wanted to go along with it because I wanted to be liked, but I was also always kind of privately like, but this is a little embarrassing, right, guys? And it's funny because I still have that impulse as an adult, I think, to like participate in something and also like set myself apart from it a little bit. Because my webcomic definitely like takes place in a very like Tumblr aesthetic idiom in terms of like the cartoony art style and like the subcultural references. But I'm also obviously like making fun of it a little bit. And it's funny because I will get readers on the opposite sides of the spectrum who are like people who just like completely like seem to loathe the characters and like everything that's going on in the comic, or people who are like, oh, Milo is just like me for real.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast that is just like me for real. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And today, as you've been hearing in the intro, we are joined by yet another exciting guest. And you might be familiar with him from his ongoing webcomic, What Happens Next, which is quite the Tumblr sensation. And we're absolutely thrilled to have him on board. It is Max Graves. Max, hello.
Hi.
Before we get into today's episode, would love to hear just a little bit about sort of you, the stuff that you make, and also how our Lord and Savior John Avery Whitaker came into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a webcomic artist, sort of, a much respected job that's been...
Yeah.
Many heroes of the webcomics community, like the Control-Alt-Delete guy.
Yeah, Penny Arcade.
Yep.
I actually did read Penny Arcade as a kid.
Same.
That guy who stabbed himself in the hand. So I think there was like the appeal, like when I first started my webcomic, I had just like dropped out of college. And I was like, well, I want to do something with my time. I want to like continue doing some kind of creative work and like have something to show for like the end of this 4 years, since all of my friends are going to have degrees and I'm not.
Sure.
I actually had like a webcomic before What Happens Next that like didn't go anywhere. I think everybody kind of has that first dud.
Sure.
But yeah, after I had been like making art and like posting on like Twitter and Tumblr for a while, I had the cartoonist Remy Boydell reach out to me. And Remy is the artist of the Image comic, The Pervert. There's a very funny side effect where anytime Remy's name appears in any publication, it has parentheses The Pervert italicized right after it.
That sounds like the name of a translated French play from like the 18th century.
And Remy encouraged me to pursue comics, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll like try to write a short comic and like see where I'm going with that. And I was like, I had these characters that I had like invented when I was 16. And I ended up using them to make a comic about the internet, because at that point I was like unemployed and depressed. I was convinced that all my friends hated me and I wasn't doing a lot with my life. I ended up just sort of writing what I knew, which is sort of a comic about like people who like whose lives are like tangled up in the internet in bizarre ways. And it's also like it's a comic about, it's like also a piece of crime fiction, but I was sort of exploring the overlap between like true crime and internet drama. And like those things, you know, in a lot of ways they aren't actually that far apart. Like the comic is also like many of the principal characters are homeschooled, and I was sort of like looking back on that aspect of my life, which is, you know, put a pin in that. I listen to podcasts like a lot more than like any other human being should. Any human being should. I like once checked and I was like, oh, I have like 15 podcasts in like my podcast rotation, but you guys are one of my favorite ones. You're up there. Yeah, and I did discover Adventures in Odyssey via listening to The Worst of All Possible Worlds. My parents were not evangelical homeschoolers. My parents are actually like left-wing. My mom is a Marxist academic.
Okay. You're part of that very rare subgenre of homeschoolers. Rare but important.
Yeah, I would not say that like my homeschooling experience was 100% positive, but it was definitely like in the moments where it was traumatic in a completely different way. But I've always had kind of a fascination with evangelical homeschoolers and evangelical media, because it is this thing that is like similar to how I grew up, but also like completely fundamentally different. And I also feel like in a lot of ways where like evangelicals are kind of the last like real subculture in America. There's so many things that like sort of like used to take place around like people like existing with each other in person, like subcultures that grew up around like music and like art and like that kind of thing. And like so much of that has like moved online, which I think has been accelerated by COVID, and everything is sort of very diffuse and like you get these like, I don't know, like TikTok kids who are like dressing up in whatever way or like, you know, adopting certain aesthetic signifiers, but like they don't really have any connection to anyone or anything.
I came across your comic during one of my regular searches that I do on social media for Adventures in Odyssey. And I came across a panel of What Happens Next, in which one of the main characters is listening to the episode where Eugene goes to hell. And that was, of course, something that we memorably covered with our friend Lev on the Wit Fucking Dies episode. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This is a cool comic. I read through the whole thing. I was like, oh, I wonder if he'd be interested in maybe coming on the show. And then I found out that you had been following us already. You'd been subscribed to us on Patreon for like a year.
Yeah.
It's truly one of those weird things that, you know, you want to like leave a positive impact on the world. Like you want your legacy to leave the world a better place than when you left it. And all I can say is that the fact that we have now introduced you to this show, Max, I'm so sorry. I've never been more ashamed of anything that I've ever done. I'm so sorry that you now have to take the poison that we do once a month. And especially this month, because these are some real bad episodes. These are some rough episodes. Yeah. Brian, how dare you? Not into the deep end, but into the heart of the Atlantic Ocean.
It's very fortunate that you've already been listening to the show, because if we were throwing somebody who had never listened to this into these episodes, I think that it would be the end. I think maybe that person wouldn't even show up to record.
Yeah,
you know?
like this is by accident. This is another hodgepodge episode where like I'm introducing some characters that are going to be important in the next couple of episodes that we record. But all of these grouped together was a really unpleasant experience. Not, you know, usually there's like an ideological thing that you can attach yourself to, which is fun. You know, you get mad at it. This is just shitty writing. This is just low quality writing, to the point where once we get to the 4th episode here, which is the only episode written by Phil Lawler, you're like, here we go. Finally, someone who knows how to write.
Yeah, it's kind of a relief. Like the Preacher's Kid episode, I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute, but that one was just like unbearable to sit through. Like it's so dull.
It certainly was. And we might as well start by getting right into it, I think.
Yeah.
So yes, this is Preacher's Kid, episode 300 of Adventures in Odyssey, written by Marshall Younger, which initially premiered on February 4 of 1995.
A lot happens, weirdly, for an Odyssey episode, and yet nothing happens.
Yes.
And it is funny watching Marshall Younger over the course of the 3 episodes by him that we listened to for this, sort of try and ape, in this one, I think, McCusker's style.
Yes.
And then in the next one, more of a Lawler episode. And then the third one is just, I think, a crime against humanity. We'll certainly get to that. You know, this one, the opening of this episode to me feels like it would be featured on that like hashtag like church life TikTok thing. Like Josh, you were talking about like the like Christian e-girl thing that's now coming into like
Christian e-girls. Yeah. This is a hot new demo. Have you, Max? Have you seen this the Christian e-girl
Did you
trend?
see this? Did you hear about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like vaguely familiar with sort of like the Christian girl influencers.
Yeah.
I'm mostly not a TikTok guy, actually.
Okay.
I try to avoid it as much as I possibly can because it's like I have like multiple friends who have like been doxxed by strangers because of like saying inflammatory things on TikTok, and I'm like, I should probably like I'm like putting enough poison into my brain as it is.
It makes it easier for them to track you down when they have your real face and
exactly. Like I don't want to like talk into a camera and see people like look at my human head. Like that's just upsetting to me.
But yes, the Christian e-girl trend, I guess. This is not just Christian girl influencer. This is Christian e-girl specifically.
Okay.
Which is, you know, these are young women who are adopting the e-girl aesthetic to point people toward Christ.
Yeah. Are we going to get like Christian girl VTubers next?
Could be big. Could be huge.
Could be huge. Honestly, there's definitely a demo for that.
This is what I'm saying.
It's sort of like the overlap of like anime waifu guy and like reactionary 4chan user. And like as more and more of those people, stop being amazing atheist types and start becoming tradcath, like that's going to open up a real market for like the Christian e-girl influencers, the Christian VTubers to step in.
Right. And these online tradcaths, they don't go to church. So they have to find some way to simulate going to church. So you might as well do it with a bunch of with a virtual catgirl mass.
Or in a radio drama, which is what happens in this episode.
Would you all like to know the exact moment that I felt ancient? Was the word tradcath. What the fuck are you talking about? What is
AJ, baby child.
AJ Diddy, as a real Catholic, has no idea what trad Catholics are.
Oh, sweet baby.
Because he's not super online like Josh and I and Max. So AJ... Yeah. Once again, I'm sorry. Tradcaths.
This is going to be an episode of apologies across the board.
The traditional Catholics, AJ, they are people who have decided to convert within like the last 6 years, and they hate the Pope. You know, the usual. They're starting their own Avignon papacy, but on different social media sites.
It's mostly an aesthetic thing for them, rather than specifically
the marble statue guys. There's an overlap there. Yeah,
sure. Okay,
this is good to be discussing a lot of the up and coming trends in Catholicism and so forth. But I do want to pull it back.
This is very Protestant.
Odyssey if we can.
This is very Protestant because this episode, Preacher's Kid, is about the PKs, right? Which Catholics don't have.
So this is a question that I have for you, Max, which is, you know, you said that you did not grow up, obviously, in the church or in even a school. Was the pastor's kid phenomenon something that you were familiar with or not really?
No, I was familiar with it pop culturally, but in the city, I grew up in Chicago, so the homeschooling community that I was a part of growing up, a lot of the people were sort of like they were like, some of them have become conservatives now, but they were like hippie granola types. Some of them have gone down that anti-vax pipeline, and now they own like 10 guns.
Nice,
that's their business. But it's definitely
hippie.
I was like aware of like the Preacher's Kid as like a concept, but it wasn't something that I had direct experience with.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Well, Josh and I, of course, both went to Protestant Christian schools. We certainly knew our share of Preacher's Kids. And the thing that you need to know about like the child of a pastor is that they're all just like little rats. They're always just these strange little rodents who are more misbehaved than anyone else. They eat bizarre food, and yet they're also tattletales.
Yeah, and they're also very out of touch with their own kind of physical impulses, right?
Yeah,
and so even though they have all of these latent desires, they're not able to act on any of them. And so they channel that energy in very strange directions.
Violence.
I feel like I heard mostly about Preacher's Kid rhetoric from like TV shows. I remember there was, I think that's the whole premise of Seventh Heaven as a television show. But it's also like, I kind of understand the idea because there's sort of a similar vibe when you're like the coach's kid. like in any sort of sports
any kind
team.
of like public parent
figure, like you have to sort of live up to that. A joke was on my dad for coaching the soccer team because I'm the least athletic person perhaps alive. And so usually it's just like, oh, everyone's worried about nepotism. Like, oh, he's going to give like AJ like the best position on the team. And my dad was like, no, my child is terrible at soccer. Let's put the actual good kids. It was like one of the most only meritocracy teams in our little league.
And when it comes to this particular episode, and I think it's so funny that we keep on like sharing stories because we don't want to talk about this fucking episode.
I get it.
I get it. I promise you I get it. But we have to talk about it. This is the content. Basically,
this is the contract we made.
Signed and sealed in blood. Basically, what's been going on, as we'll recall, with George, the patriarch of the Barkley family. George Barkley has, as of late, decided to become a pastor, right? He quit his middle-class job doing some broadly unspecified accountancy
Well, he was
work.
laid off, but then he was offered a new job that he then didn't take because he went to seminary instead. And now he's not a seminarian, I think. I think at this point he is full-blown pastor.
He's a full-blown pastor, and
it was the McKinsey branch in Odyssey, right? That he worked for. He was one of the consultants from McKinsey.
Exactly.
He was fixing bread prices.
So George has been basically preaching at this church for a little bit now, and the kids keep dicking around. And this is becoming a problem just from a reputational perspective.
Mrs. Erskine came up to me after the service today.
You're kidding.
What?
She told both of you?
You heard about this too?
Mrs. Erskine has a way of getting her point across.
You're telling me.
Look, Donna, I know how Mrs. Erskine is, but this is the second time in 2 weeks she said something to me about you.
I wasn't doing anything. Kevin dropped Marcia's purse, and I laughed a little bit. Well, I wasn't the only one. Why did she single me out?
Probably because you're the daughter of the preacher now. People are watching you more closely than they watch other kids.
So I'm the only one that can get into trouble?
No, of course not. As a matter of fact, a couple of them got in trouble last night. Did you hear about it?
No.
Well, they were at the Donovan house.
The Donovan House?
The
Donovan House!
Next to Gowersfield. It's the new hangout for the kids, I guess, but it's condemned and ready to fall down, and they're not supposed to be there. You haven't been there, have you, Donna?
No.
Good, because it's dangerous and it's trespassing.
I didn't clip the first scene, which is George giving a sermon while the scenario described happens.
We have already seen what we just heard.
Yeah.
We already saw that or heard that happen, right? This is the second time we are re-describing something that we have already witnessed.
I did find it like difficult to take notes on because it was so like astonishingly boring. Like the only thing that happens that's of interest to this part of the episode, you guys have talked about before on the podcast, like in Odyssey, we rarely see anybody at church. So I guess like that's something notable that the
this is a
Barkley
new
plot,
thing.
has introduced into the show's universe. But like it's rough when like the most interesting thing you can say about an episode of a Christian radio show is, oh, they go to church in this one. What do you know? And this bit of exposition does kind of like, you're like, oh, okay. Like it sets up the entire conflict of the episode and you basically know completely how it's going to unfold from there. It's right. Like she's being like quote unquote unruly in church and she's going to like end up at this abandoned house sometime. And then, like, you know, she's going to get in trouble and it's going to cause conflict with her dad. Honestly, though, it doesn't even, like... It's weird because it kind of sets up these conflicts and then resolves them in the most anticlimactic manner possible. Like, it doesn't even deliver on what this implies is going to happen in the episode, which is already not very interesting.
Right. There's this Mrs. Erskine lady, right?
Yeah.
And
who is a very real type of guy, I will say.
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
There just isn't quite enough. Like, there's simultaneously too much of her and also not nearly enough.
There's something about that first church scene, which I do think is interesting in that they just let George Barkley just talk in the background and give a sermon. And
you can tell he's fucking boring, but the show's like, this is what a good pastor is.
Well, it sounds like an ASMR track a little bit because just every once in a while you hear, praise him, praise him, praise him. And I feel like what's subliminal messaging?
ASMR.
But like what subliminal messaging are they trying to like sneak into here? I will also say that I prefer my exposition to be delivered as if it were the Muffin Man. The Donovan House, the old abandoned Donovan House that's out by Gower's Field. Well, she's married to the Donovan House, the Donovan House. Like it's the most basic level. And the thing about Marshall Younger is that there are interesting like bits of lore about the town that are dropped in here.
Right,
for example,
he's the lore guy.
Because he's the lore guy. So did I have fun listening to this episode? Yeah.
That's a really bold thing to admit.
Would anyone else? No.
Well,
no,
and of course,
probably not. Because the whole time I'm just like, what the fuck happened to the Donovans?
Yeah.
And then throughout the episode, he has little breadcrumbs that something very bad happened to the Donovans.
we don't
and
talk
it doesn't
about
get
the
paid
Donovans.
off,
Never.
which is just fucking weird. Anyway, let's hear Mrs.
will.
Erskine bitching Donna out here.
So I guess I'll see you at the dinner tomorrow.
Right. Wait, dinner?
The senior citizens dinner. Did you forget?
The senior citizens dinner? But I'm not even a senior in high school.
Senior citizens
Your
dinner.
whole family's invited. The senior citizen class wants to say how much we really appreciate our new
I would kill
pastor's
myself.
family. So we're having a dinner. Now you can't very well miss that, can you?
Like she
Yes.
is, this woman is awful. So the first scene, everyone's
the
just
worst.
like, you know, trying to pass some gum to each other, and she's like, "Shh, you awful fucking little kids." It's like that British lady on the video that was going around Twitter the other day, where she's like, "I will slap you halfway to Zimbabwe. Get the fuck out of here." Like,
Max, do you have experience with ladies like this?
Oh, absolutely. Like, there are a lot of people like this in the homeschooling community because, everything is run by people's parents. You're like constantly like in the somebody's mom panopticon. Where, like, there is nothing you can do and nowhere you can go that is not being witnessed. By the panoptimom. You're always under surveillance, and like somebody is always like champing at the bit to like tell your parents on you.
Is it just boredom, do you think? Or is there like some sort of like, I mean, what do you think drives that kind of behavior in the panoptimom?
I think that like a lot of people who homeschool, and probably also a lot of like church ladies, are just people who like get off on being controlling and like, I don't know, like just sort of this chronic need to like have your nose in everybody else's business because like, I don't know, like your life is empty and you're bored and like you don't have much else going on.
I always thought it was really nice that I went to a different church than the one that all my teachers went to.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing the kids who had to go to school and church at the same time. So it's like, oh, yeah, I did something that was kind of shitty, but it's not going to make its way to my parents. Versus like, well, it's Sunday. They're talking after service, and now they're going to bring up that shitty thing I did on Tuesday.
God, yes, I remember that dynamic. That like there were people.
Wow.
There were times, because I was a real shit in high school, right?
What?
And I know, shocking. And there were times that I definitely was rude toward other kids' moms. But the only time that those moms sort of had their opportunity to bring those grievances back to me was through my own mom. And those opportunities, of course, raised themselves after morning service at church. That's just kind of the way these communities operate.
Yeah, I think that's what I thought was interesting about this episode, because it's like, oh yeah, I know this dynamic. I know who these people are. I know about these PKs. I love talking about PKs. You know me. Every day
Penalty
I'm like,
kicks,
I'm like PK, risky business.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was for you.
That was good. Thank you. Pika, risky business.
So
PK Fire, PK Pulse.
So Donna, she can't hang out with her friends. Like the thing, she couldn't make it to a movie earlier. Now she can't make it to a hayride because she has to do the senior citizens dinner. She has to do all of these other events. She has lost her social life completely because of George's new status as the pastor.
And this is the other thing that I kind of wanted to raise as a topic of conversation here, right? Yeah. That George, now being the pastor, has just become completely in thrall to anything that any of his congregants demand of him.
Yeah.
I think on some level this is maybe realistic for a new pastor, but on the other hand, the whole time I was like, none of this is Donna's fault. Like, it's her dad is being a fucking bitch, you know?
Yeah, honestly, through the whole episode, like, my primary reaction to it was just, oh god, I feel, like, really bad for Donna.
Yeah.
I mean, like, imagine, like, being a teenager and, like, you have to go sit through a senior citizens dinner instead of, like, going out and having fun with your friends. Like, Donna did nothing wrong in this episode. Critical support for Donna.
Absolutely.
No, she's fine. She's hanging around abandoned building. My dad, taught the senior citizen Sunday school class, so I went to plenty of the church senior citizen dinners over at Earl's on Route 66.
All right.
And oh boy, you love to get like public readings of like email forwards that just really spoke to some old lady named Bibbs. Like,
yeah,
Bibbs was a very sweet woman. She saw all of my plays in high school, but still,
I just think it's like, it's so cruel that George has this impulsive, awful life decision, and everyone suffers for it. Like every episode that we've listened to ever since he became a pastor is just how much becoming a pastor has made his family suffer in one way or another.
Not only is Donna and Jimmy, for that matter, not only are they getting it from the olds, they're also getting it from their peers, right?
Yeah. So here is Kevin talking to Donna's friend, Eric Myers, who wants to ask her out on a date to the hayride that they're going to. But Kevin gets in his head.
You don't know the Barkleys.
I know the Barkleys have changed. They're the preacher family now.
You're crazy.
I'm serious. You'll have to watch every step you take. You date Donna, you date the preacher.
Damn.
And we get a fantasy sequence?
Yeah. I've
This
never
was
been to a
wild.
drive-in movie before.
Yeah, it's neat.
Going to the drive-in
really
in
nice.
1995.
I wanted to give you something.
What is it?
Well,
It's a
I
pin.
wrote a little something for you. It's a poem.
A poem?
But it's
A
not
poem?
that great or anything. I'm not really a writer.
You really wrote me a poem? How sweet.
Well, anyway, here it is.
Thanks.
Hold it. Wait a minute. Let me see that. I need to check it for content.
Dad!
All right, I'll get this here. Can't have that.
Banjo-Kazooie have just shown up.
Cherish is spelled with an H.
Please, Dad.
The rest is okay. It's a nice poem, Eric.
Thanks.
By the way, that last scene in the movie completely contradicted Deuteronomy 14:6. I think we should leave.
Dad!
Hey, is there enough room up there? I'm gonna come up there with you guys. Oh, let me get. Oh,
Just wanted to say that Eric here is played by Joe Daman, who is the kid from McGee and Me. He's the me.
Oh.
Wow.
The other
He was
folks
the
on the
me.
Family Entertainment. Yeah. He and his family have a whole arc in this series that we haven't done any of the episodes on. This is his very last episode on the show.
So Max, your thoughts on this fantasy sequence, this way that the family is being portrayed and perceived?
It's like probably the most interesting part of the episode, and that it like kind of introduces a comic concept of like, oh no, like what if you were on a date and like her dad was there and tried to climb into the front seat with you and read your poetry, I guess.
Push his daughter out of the car, put his arm around you.
What's interesting about this is I think the perspective on dating in the mainstream evangelical community shifts after this point. Because then we get books like I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, don't ever do one-on-one dates. Otherwise you might just stick it in her. Having a chaperoned date starts to become a more normal concept in this world. Whereas in 1995, this is just typically like, yeah, even the Christian teens will go to the drive-in movie theater and see fucking Gidget or whatever.
I do have a question for you, Max. Were you a poetry guy? Did you ever get any poetry to any of your crushes?
I think like I've always considered poetry sort of a high risk, low reward endeavor. Where like if you write a good poem, it's not that impressive compared to how embarrassing it would be if the poem was really bad.
Sure.
Very smart, much smarter.
Is there something you'd like to share with us, AJ? I have a feeling this is setting us up for something.
No, that's all. That was my middle school move, man. I'd write poetry, and that's how I got all my middle school
now you just write
girlfriends.
full 20-minute musicals.
Yes, I sure do. And I mean, but it's different because there's music now. There is something that like music can save I think a bad poem. I think, but like if it's just the poem naked and bare, you're right, Max. It is. Ooh, it is a high risk, and I don't know. I don't know if
AJ,
that's even a
did you-
currency that people do anymore. I don't know if kids still write poems.
Here's the important thing, AJ. Did you pull?
Yeah.
Did you, Paul?
Yeah,
I did.
Those middle
I did.
school poems, they got you some.
They
got
actually
you some
they were
strange.
they were very successful. Actually, yeah. Had to
about
find a
these-
rhyme for dolphin because
What
everyone
about
loves
these days
dolphins.
though? Is it
Yeah.
are poems still the currency of trade, or how are the younger generation getting along these days?
You know, I don't think anybody's ever written me a poem. I don't think I've ever exchanged a poem. I feel like what you do now is you just send somebody a lot of really long-winded text messages. And that's how you know they're invested in that. You're invested in it. If they get the double text.
Yeah, that's not that different, I guess, from, back in my day. I mean, it was on AOL Instant Messenger, right?
Sure.
But it was the same thing.
But you had more
similar
people on
dynamic.
LiveJournal and Zanga, so poetry certainly was a bigger part of the vernacular, I think.
Sure.
I've never written a poem in my life.
In your day, Josh, you're a Zoomer.
Well, I know. I feel like the other currency of trade was like the vague but specific enough, like live journal post or AOL Instant Messenger away message that was discernible to the person that was the target of said message, right? Where it was like, anybody else may see this as overly vague, but I'm writing about somebody in particular, and that person will know because I put in a couple little secret notes.
Yes, and that person is constantly checking your away message just in case.
Oh, yeah.
I do miss the concept of away messages. It was nice to be like, I am no longer
Instagram kind of has
to talk.
them now.
Yeah. Oh, is that true?
Yeah, I don't really know how they work, but I see that there's a little like speech bubble you can put over your name. Instagram is so confusing to me. I don't know how to do anything. I need to go back to like stones, petroglyphs, that kind of communication.
Max, we just need you to tell us that we're cool. Can you just do that, please? Can you just tell us that
this is why we're having you on, please? I need to know that I'm still
I'm trying to leech off of your
ancient.
youth as 1,000-year-old vampires from the millennial era.
Yeah. On the scale of like, I've always like, I think like on the internet, like I've always had like a lot of friends who were substantially older than me just because of like niche interests. And I've also lived in housing co-ops for the past 4 years. And this reminds me of the fact that I used to have a 35-year-old housemate named Jason who would like watch old episodes of The Critic with me and try to defend Jordan Peterson. So you guys are definitely beating that guy.
God.
At the time, Jordan Peterson was still in that benzo coma, so it was a really easy argument to win.
Well, now that we've cleared that...
we're cool, we're good, and I'm going to pull us right back into the episode. Yes, we now have Donna, who has effectively been otherized, right? She is no longer in the good graces of the olds, nor is she seen as a peer by her fellow youth. And we get even more senior dinner bullshit.
Yeah.
But Jimmy actually really enjoys it for some reason.
Yeah, Jimmy has adjusted very well. He's kind of he's an oddball. This is how they've made him as a teenager. He's not just your every child. He's this sort of weird kid. And here we get a little clip of this.
Donna, you have to come over here. Mr. Williams is doing a puppet show using a zucchini, a rolled up paper plate, and his dentures.
It's very dirty.
It's hilarious.
No thanks.
Oh, Jimmy, hurry! You're missing it. We're trying to find all 50 states and Mr. Baker's liver spots.
Well, gotta go.
Oh, brother.
Oh, look! I believe it's Florida.
They're looking at his dick, right? It has to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't hate that joke. The first joke is not good. The setup of doing a puppet show with a zucchini and a plate or whatever. That's not funny.
Anything.
No.
Yeah, no.
Why do they have a whole zucchini?
the senior citizens dinner.
Yeah, the senior citizens dinner. Like you're gonna serve a guy who wears dentures just like a complete like unsliced zucchini.
Yeah, I know.
Is it raw?
That's the only thing they serve there.
So
it's just a giant pile of zucchini.
Yeah.
In the 90s, that was boy dinner.
Yeah.
I like how weird Jimmy is. I wish they would just push him a little weirder.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they don't know
they could
quite.
lean into
I don't
it.
think characterization is usually Odyssey's strong suit. There are a lot of characters that are kind of like indistinct and are just like whatever they need to be for the given plot.
Yeah.
I noticed that with like both appearances of Sam in the series.
In the later
like,
episodes,
he doesn't really seem to be the same character across both episodes.
Right.
And that's a problem that pops up a lot. You would think that Marshall Younger, as the guy who like wrote the lore Bible, would have a better handle on this stuff. But like when a character has any like individuality or quirk whatsoever, like I tend to latch onto it in these episodes because it's just like Donna is like such a flat character. We have no sense of like what she's interested in or like what she likes to do or like really like anything that she has going on with her outside of like her relationship to her family or like her peers who are also like very generically written teenagers. And it's sort of like, I am just begging for like any level of like character detail.
I want Jimmy to run off and be like, ooh, I'll find Minnesota. Like just get like really super into it. At least something.
Yeah.
Or like he like progressively becomes an old man over the course of the episode.
That would be kind of funny.
Yeah,
like he starts wearing his pants higher and like gets really into
Whitland.
He just carries a deck of playing cards in his back pocket wherever he goes.
Yeah. Starts talking about Matlock reruns.
Right. No, that could be huge. Instead, what we get is right back to Donna again.
Yeah.
And we'll recall that there's this whole situation with like a hayride.
Sure is.
But then she meets up with these teens and it's like, oh, we're not going to go to the hayride. We're going to go to the Donovan house.
Yeah.
And
so Donna
the
is told
Donovan
that
house.
The Donovan house.
That's where you are. Donna is told that she cannot go to the hayride because it turns out George has already booked her for a very informal, like, living room Bible study that he does on Fridays that it seemed that Jimmy's going to be there for anyway.
It's so fucking bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Like, it's not important.
If you needed her to be there, you could just like get her in next Friday. This is a weekly Bible study. It's not a big deal. Come on.
So it's really important, Josh. Like you know, it's the golden hour. You got all these union contracts. You can't just. So Donna instead is like, no, fuck it. I'm ditching Bible study. I'm gonna go through our very walkable town of Odyssey over to the hayride. But then the kids, as they're all walking there, take a turn in the other direction.
I don't get it. I thought the hayride was at Gower's farm, the other way.
It is.
Mr.
But we decided
Gower.
to skip it.
What? Then where are we going?
Right there.
What's that?
You don't know what that is, Donna?
No.
That's the Donovan house.
Wait a minute. We're not supposed to go there.
The girl, by the way, the friend there is Marcia, who previously appeared in the Paul Revere's Midnight Ride and Timmy's Cabin, and now she's like a bad kid, I guess.
Okay.
Again, talking about characterization.
Look,
just
Laura
like,
Deep
here's that kid.
Off mic in Odyssey, you know, a lot of development, a lot of interesting character growth. I just, we know you're not supposed to go to the Donovan house. I think you've said it conservatively 18 times up until this moment. We don't need reminding. It's just it can be so exhausting because there is the seed of an interesting idea here because not to jump ahead too much, but like the thing that happens at the Donovan house is also out of Donna's control. Donna doesn't the only choice
do anything.
Yeah, the only choice Donna really makes is that she wants to go to a hayride, which would have been fine, but then the plot gets hijacked away from her and she's just like a victim of fucking circumstance. Yeah. And how much more interesting would it be to have her actually rebel against her dad, you know, like to actually
to have her do something damaging. Yeah. Well, so as we go into the house, we learn some facts about the Donovans.
Ooh.
We have to go tonight. This is the 30th anniversary of the disappearance.
What disappearance?
30 years ago today, the Donovan family mysteriously disappeared. Never heard from again. And every year since then, on this date, people have noticed strange lights in an upstairs window, flickering.
So, Max, you were on the edge of your seat at this point, right?
Yeah, well, I know they went through the no-no door, but I just don't know that. Something really weird about this is that, like, they set up the whole Eric plot, and then it just gets completely dropped from here on out.
Oh, yeah, no, he went on a date with somebody else. It's done.
Yeah, and
Donna,
that's the last we see of
Allison Davis.
Yeah.
Why did I write that down? I don't know.
Allison Davis, you sound sad.
And he's never on the show again. His whole family is never on the show again.
Wait,
That's
so
it.
all of them go through the no-no door? Just like that?
That's
amazing.
That's what happens when you don't lay pipe in Donna. You go away.
There's actually a no-no pit near the hayride. It just saves time. It's just, okay, everyone we're not going to see again. Get on the cart. We're throwing you in the pit.
So the house catches fire.
Because of just a Mr. Magoo series of mishaps, because the kid who brought them all to the Donovan house was like, it's okay, I brought a lantern here earlier. I already left my supply of lantern. And he lights this lantern, which is a lantern of fire. Not a flashlight. He could have had a flashlight. They could have had two flashlights.
Or like an electric lantern.
Yeah. Like this guy went either a day earlier or like in the afternoon. He's like, here's my lantern. I'm going to fill it up with all of my favorite kerosene from Walmart. I'm going to stick it right here behind a chair on the porch. Like he's playing his own little game of Gone Home just for himself.
Yeah.
He's like, I've left a bunch of keys everywhere.
There's a little Christmas duck you can take to the upper levels of the Donovan house. That's what the flickering is.
There's a bunch of tapes that he's recorded himself, but in character as his gay younger sister. It's going to be a very immersive night of entertainment and fun and even some poignancy. But then, of course, he gets startled by a cat and drops the lantern, and the entire house burns down in about 30 seconds.
Burn home.
Why would he be carrying around like an old-timey like oil lamp? Where did he even get that as a teenager?
He got that from the Underground Railroad tunnel under Wits End next to the no-no door.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
How could I forget the Underground Railroad tunnel under Wits End?
How could you forget? Come on.
Yeah.
The show seems to have.
It's mildly interesting to like see another piece of the town geography, but like they don't do anything in the house.
No.
They don't really like poke around in there. It seems like the local teens show up there and just sort of stand around.
Right.
I guess because like if you implied that they were doing anything even remotely illicit in there, that would be outside the bounds of the radio show. Like you can't imply that the teens are like drinking or like hooking up or like blasting cigs.
I actually think that's a really good point. And I wanted to just unpack that a little bit more, that these episodes all sort of pertain to some sort of like child, I don't know, deviancy or whatever, right?
Yeah,
where it's like,
yeah, like I understand there can't be any like imitable behavior, but like it sort of goes back to think of like Donna has no agency in this plot. Like they don't even burn the house down on purpose.
No.
Like if I had to script doctor this a little bit, maybe it's Donna's idea to go to the house in the first place instead of her just being involuntarily dragged there. Maybe she's like, oh, I don't want to see Eric on his date with Allison. Let's go to the Donovan house that I've heard so much about, where my dad specifically told me not to go. Like that would make a lot more sense as a plot point. And then the other kids like peer pressure her into like doing something dangerous in there that then causes the house to burn down. Instead of it being like she gets dragged there and the house gets burned down on accident by someone else and she doesn't do anything.
Also, the kids don't run away.
No.
They stay at the house when it burns so that the police can come pick them up and bring them home.
Yeah, like you've set fire to the evidence. Like, why would you hang around at the scene of the crime?
It's the middle of the night. Just leave.
There was already a cop car in Gowers Field for an unrelated incident.
Yeah,
they were burying a body.
We get this too with like once Donna gets escorted back home, right? Where George just kind of chews her out. But like, again, we don't have any sense of what's going to come of this other than she's broadly apologetic, I guess.
Right. So George is doing his Bible study, and I wanted to just grab this little clip of, you know, the policeman has brought her there and he's like, there are no charges being pressed because, well, we can't draw more attention to the Donovan case because the police are heavily involved. That's why that one cop is out in Gowers Field digging a ditch. So George, in front of his whole Bible study, has to tell Donna to go to her room, and I just listen for a second.
You're okay?
Yeah,
We're going to talk about this later.
I know.
Going up to your room.
Okay.
And I want you to think in your head, you know, what does this remind me of that George and Donna have done before? Right? There was another episode where Donna got in a lot of trouble. And George...
for dressing like a slut, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But in that one, you can hear George's absolute incandescent rage hidden behind his whispers.
Donna, is that a new outfit?
Yeah, Dad.
Would you please cover yourself up and come home with me?
George, before you...
It's all right, Whit. It's only a domestic incident. Let's go, Donna. Now.
Coming, Dad.
Whereas here it's very soft. Here it's like mild. He's concerned for her and he's like, well, I have to handle this later, but I'm in public. But he was in public before. But it's what Donna has done here, even though it's this huge trespass, literally, she has trespassed against her father and against the Donovans, who are missing, presumed dead. This is nothing like showing some boob, some top boob or under boob or side boob or whatever.
I mean, but what kid hasn't performed light arson? You know?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by, like, it's weird because the whole episode is like building up towards this confrontation with her father, and then it's so mild when it happens.
Yeah.
And like, I get that they don't want it to be like maybe too upsetting for young listeners, but it's also like, you know, he's doing this Bible study about parenting where he talks about like, you know, you have to like have control of your children. I forget his exact wording, but it's definitely like gesturing at, he says at some point, like training a child, like it feels like it's gesturing at the child abuse industrial complex that in fact like Focus on the Family is built on.
Yeah.
And then weirdly he has this very like soft, like muted confrontation with Donna, and it's very strange because like, I don't think that that's what would happen in real life. Like even my parents who were not, you know, like, they were not like this kind of like evangelical. Like they would have really fucking, I would not have heard like the end of it for like hours and hours.
Oh
probably,
yeah.
if I burned down a house as a teenager.
I would simply send all the old people home. You know, like why would you continue to have the Bible study under these circumstances? That doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
Well, how else is Jimmy going to meet women? So There's also a bit that I thought was very, very, very weird. Right before the cop leaves, the cop who we have never met before, I'm pretty
he's
sure,
not a recurring character,
turns to Donna and says, Donna, I'm very disappointed in you. And it's this horribly flat delivery. But I was like, who the fuck are you? Who cares if you're disappointed in me? Get the fuck out of here. And it's just because he is a cop, right? But he kind of sounds like Doyle. Like I didn't know if we had met him before. And
no, it's not someone we met.
This is just that reflexive, focus on the family, defer to authority thing. And
he would know her in part because now she is so public, right? Because George is a town authority figure.
Sure.
And we get a little bit more of this too, in terms of like authority and struggling with authority, because then the weirdest thing is, and I know you didn't grab
no, I didn't
clip
clip
Brian,
any of it
because
it was
just so strange.
Yeah.
Like the church calls an emergency meeting of, I guess, the elders and deacons and maybe also some parishioners. And George has to go and defend himself in front of the congregation for why his daughter did these things. But then after he gives a big old speech about how like, oh, she wasn't, it's not my fault actually that she did this, but it kind of is. Then Mrs. Erskine, the horrible biddy from earlier, is like, well, actually, we just wanted to let you know that we love you. And we wanted to be nice.
Yeah, the whole emergency meeting was to say, "Hey, you doing okay?" And also, like that type of woman, the Mrs. Erskine type lady, that never happens. She does not have repentance in her heart. She never stops being a busybody. She never stops feeling that like moral superiority even over the pastor of the church she goes to.
I mean, it is really like, once again, it's like they're setting up this entire conflict that's like building the whole episode, and then it just completely fizzles out like nothing.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not good storytelling.
It's like there was a note where they were like, yes, this is a very real type of person in the church, but we can't go and make fun of our most pious, our strongest prayer warriors.
They're funding us.
Yeah.
It's these biddies that we've built this entertainment empire on. What's so weird about Mrs. Erskine appearing is that there's no like indication that she is in the room in the scene. Until he's just like, who said that? And then like emerging from the shadows, Erskine comes to her and says, it was me! That is literally the note I took, Josh. It was me, George. Me all along.
She's wearing a cape. She's wearing Om's hat.
But yeah, I mean, this is where it ends.
It's just like, it's an Erskine ex machina kind of thing.
George is also like, hey, you shouldn't have done that, Donna. But also, I was being a bit of a head case, I guess.
Yeah, he comes to an understanding with her, just like he did with the music thing, or just like Dale did with the music thing. It's just like, oh, sometimes there is kind of an interesting point, but then it gets buried under the whole Mrs. Erskine apologizing plot.
Yeah, no, there is. What I wrote was like, oh, there is some nuance here because George admits that he's wrong.
But it's all nuance in service of lessening the conflict, therefore the interest or drama that is supposed to be there. They are always like pulling back the stakes.
So then here's a question again for you, Max, is as far as conflict goes, or wanting conflict and meaningful resolution, what would you have preferred to see here? Would you have preferred to see, George like hitting Mrs. Erskine over the head with a folding chair, maybe, or what would that have looked like?
Some kind of cage match situation. I mean, I guess like maybe just have Mrs. Erskine actually be upset with him, so that when he gives this speech, he's actually defending himself, as opposed to talking into thin air for a little bit and then having everybody be like, oh, no, it's okay, actually. Nobody actually cares. There was no problem here the entire time. And it's like,
have George actually stand up to his congregation. Have him assert his status and
which
say,
you know what?
Sometimes. What? This is something that's going to happen. She's a teenager and I haven't let her have a social life. And so he learns a lesson, but you just can't, you can't do that. You have to find some way to undermine and
because
square
the church must always be forgiving. It must always welcome me back in. And these are just good people who are just looking out for their neighbors. And if their neighbor's suffering, they will always come to their help. Always. So anyway,
our next episode is basically...
Thank God that one's over.
Yeah, thank God. And we'll probably go through this next one a little bit quicker. This is The Good, the Bad, and the Butch, episode 301, written once again by Marshall Younger. This aired a week following the previous episode, so February 11 of 1995, and
right before Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
it's about a kind of Valentine if you think about it.
And this one starts with some very boring fucking, oh my God, I hated this shit. Like, Sam is our guy. Let's talk about Sam for a moment, shall we? The character of Sam.
Josh, just 1 minute. 1 minute. The good, the bad,
yeah,
and the Butch?
Yeah.
What is this?
Oh.
The Butch?
A leather bar?
Oh.
So let's talk
You
about the
got
character
me.
of Sam. Sam is sort of our stand-in, every boy. How did we feel about Sam? Did we identify with him? Did we feel strongly about his character?
Like a 2x4 with googly eyes. What do you want? There's nothing here.
No, he is such a weenie. He's a little too much like me. Like if he were written in another venue to be like a character this nerdy, he would have a bunch of Adventures in Odyssey tapes that he listened to all the time. Like this kid fucking sucks, but maybe one day he'll suck dick and have a podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hat. I wear that as a hat.
I did have a little fun, like, reading like a vague homoeroticism into this episode in terms of the friendship between Sam and Butch. There's something a little bit fruity going on there, I think.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interest, and we'll get that in some of these clips that I have. But yeah, so Butch and Sam. Butch's name is Brian, by the way, or was Brian. And it depends on who is going to acknowledge his current name or who's going to dead name him throughout the episode.
Right.
Yeah, everybody keeps dead naming him.
Problematic.
Yeah.
Canceled.
The whole thing starts with Sam.
Odyssey?
The whole thing starts with Sam at the clothes store with his mom, and then she's like, "Hey, look, that's Brian's mom. You used to hang out with Brian." He's like, "No," and then they do the thing where two moms hang out, which is, again, it's a very real phenomenon that you might be familiar with if you're a 9-year-old kid. But it sucks. It's just bad. It's just like there's a reason we don't dramatize this usually, or someone might dramatize it better somewhere else. But this is just
the note that
dull.
I had here is that it felt very like Down Gilead Lane. You know, this is realistic in parentheses derogatory. It's just
like it's about Sam and Butch. Put them together at school.
We don't need this whole clothes shopping intro sequence. It's like, this is as boring to listen to as it would be to experience.
Yeah. Yes. Max, in your experience, is this how the panopticon worked?
Honestly, it was definitely an element. Like, you could definitely like run into the other homeschooling parent, like at the store, or like doing I don't know, they were always like doing some kind of activity, like, oh, I have to like go get these herbs from the garden and like drop them off at Mary's house, and then you have to stand there while I like stand at her doorway for like a full hour talking to her about plants.
It does sound like you grew up in Hobbiton.
Yeah,
actually. Yeah.
So in homeschooling, there is sort of the phenomenon of the homeschooling co-op, where like some homeschoolers would like sort of band together to like rent out like a church basement or some other cheap space, where like parents would like teach classes or attempt to teach classes, which is, you know, you would learn biology from like somebody's mom who may or may not have been qualified. Sometimes there were outside teachers hired, like this white guy who taught the Japanese class. I always get a weird vibe off that guy. I don't know.
Sounds like rightfully so.
Yeah, he had like a really long ponytail, and a bunch of the like teenage girls had weirdly charged, like friendly, like a weirdly charged, like personal relationship to him that I never fully understood. But what I will say is, I think like definitely like there was the thing of like, your mom like trying to get you to be friends with somebody else's kid because like it's like, oh well, like they teach the classes, or like they're in like important to like the homeschooling social scene, so like you have to be nice to their kid.
Right.
And also like there wasn't really a lot of bullying that took place in homeschooling communities, and a lot of like what would happen was like you would try to invite people over or get them to hang out with you, and they would like, you just couldn't get anybody to show up. Like there were times as a teenager where I was just like alone in the house during all of my free time. I used to play board games against myself because I was like,
oh, that's real. Oh, I feel
just
that.
That kind of like quiet exclusion was really what like fueled the social dynamics. Not that's particularly relevant to this episode, but I just thought it was interesting. Like, actually, the emotional crux of this episode that I do think kind of works is like, there is something very sad as a kid where you have this very close friendship with somebody, and they kind of like, they change, like they lose interest in you, and they kind of like ebb away out of your life.
Yeah.
Like that was something that happened to me a lot as a kid, especially because we didn't have the social structure of school, like pushing us together in the same way.
Sure, yeah.
Like it was easy for people to sort of just stop showing up. And like, on that front, I can kind of relate to Sam, and I can kind of like, you know, I can kind of see like why this, you know, seeing Butch or Brian again is like, oh, this is kind of a bummer for him. Like he's being reminded of like that's I think like some of the early like one of the earliest like bad things that happens to you as a kid, like barring other trauma, is when you have this really like close friendship with somebody and then they're just gone forever.
Yeah,
and that's that.
And I think that's a more interesting story than what we get, which is that Butch
so much more
Butch becomes a bad kid.
Right.
Yeah, he became a bad kid.
He stops hanging out with Sam. He stops going to church. He stops watching baseball. He becomes less interested in sports, I guess.
Well, I wasn't really sure what that was either.
Oh, well, that's just morals, right? Is the moment that you stop following Major League Baseball. That's the moment that you've lost your morals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or you start following the Yankees.
Well, yeah, that's even
well,
worse.
here's the thing is Butch is just so busy with bully stuff because we find out that they keep a very detailed schedule.
They do.
The Bones of Rath.
Yeah, it's a full-time job being a bully in Odyssey.
Yeah, it feels like they're in Model UN Club or something. Like they have weekly meetings to go to and like scheduled events.
I mean,
it's a very weird way to operate as a juvenile delinquent.
Having gone to Model UN, those kids were so mean.
Oh, yeah?
They were so mean. Oh, my God. Everybody in my Model UN club had an elected position, like a token elected position, except for me. I was the one person that nobody voted for.
Oh, man.
No.
And, like, to be socially excluded in Model UN
That's
club is, like, one of the
rough.
most humiliating things that can happen because you're surrounded by nerds and they're all just like, I don't know, though. This kid, like, we can't be seen with you. Like,
yeah.
There was a schism that formed in my Model UN group that was basically across gender lines, but thankfully I got to exist between gender in my senior year of high school. So the boys decided to do things where they'd be like, oh yeah, we have to send a couple delegates to this thing. We'll just send the girls and then we're going to go and get breakfast at the cafe next to the state capitol building. And then the girls did the same thing to the boys. And so I got breakfast twice. That day.
Yeah.
That's what you call playing the angles, and that's what diplomacy is all about.
Yeah, you gotta play both sides.
I'm increasingly realizing that this episode is going to be a lot more entertaining if we just talk about our own experiences.
Yeah, I have a bunch of clips from this episode, but it's really unpleasant. Butch makes a bunch of jokes that aren't jokes, and Sam doesn't get them, and then he says never mind, which just feels like it's Marshall Younger editing himself in real time and then not going back and deleting it.
You gotta commit to your bad jokes. At least for all of his faults, Lawler really goes hard on his terrible jokes.
But can we please listen to the clip where Rodney Rathbone is talking to the Bones of Rath, his gang, about going to Pound Town?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Here we go.
Let's find out who it was and just pound them. We gotta do more than pound them. You mean you want to do something in addition to pounding them?
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Just as long as pounding is included.
Yeah.
Immediately after that, they say, nail one, get one free.
I was about to bring that up. Like, I was kind of chuckling at the pounding thing, and then I was like, okay, fine, they're old-timey bullies, whatever, I have to let this slide.
Sure.
And then they immediately say nail, and I was like, are you kidding me with this? Like,
he has to know what he's doing.
They just do.
Pounding.
Do you know what you do in addition to pounding, though? They actually say it in another episode. Here we go.
Probing, prodding, scratching, and crawling around.
Yeah, so that's the full full evenings
That's the range. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, you say they must have known, but this reminds me of something that I read, and I think it was something put out by Focus on the Family, where this guy was lamenting that making love is now used as a euphemism for having sex. Because
I'm sorry. What? As opposed to what?
This guy.
What was the original meaning?
I don't know.
Making love used to just mean sort of like hitting on or like sparking. You know that term, sparking.
Actually
it's true.
Though.
It is true.
That true?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Brian was also a teenager in the 1910s. So
no, that's the whole thing. Is like or like a euphemism for dancing, as featured, of course, in the Bob Martin musical, The Drowsy Chaperone. But then, of course, it's a euphemism. So then it just becomes more and more like you're hinting at pounding. Or as Edwin Blackard would say,
probing, prodding, scratching, and crawling around.
In other words, making love.
And the reason that Rodney and his gang are endeavoring to go to Pound Town is that other people have been doing pranks at the school, which is just that's the Bones of Rath turf. Apparently, somebody hung up a poster of the principal from the flagpole, which is a big prank.
Yeah.
And that should be the exclusive domain of the Bones of
These guys
Rath.
are fucking, they've got the grind set. They are sitting around all day planning japes. This is like Ocean's 11 level of japes.
They have to have they have it to the point where they know the schedules of the kids' parents, so they won't get caught, which would require like surveillance and like tailing them.
But they don't. They make it happen in an
fully
unfunny
straight.
way, right?
It's
like
wild.
it's so underplayed. The fact that Rodney just knows what everybody's dad does throughout the week, like. That's such a good gag. He's gathering intel on every family, but it just it falls flat here.
And we find out that like Butch is now put on assignment basically to hang out with Sam so he can get tickets to a banquet.
That's right. Because the master plan here is that they are going to, and I want to make sure that I get this right.
Okay, because I've got my notes too if you get it wrong.
I think what's going to happen is that Rodney Rathbone is going to ascend to the ceiling of the gymnasium where they're doing this banquet thing, and he is going to take his lighter and he is going to sort of light up by one of those sprinklers, thus bursting the thing and causing all of the sprinklers to go off.
Yeah.
But he can't get in unless he has a ticket to the banquet.
Yeah, there's only one door inside, and it's only open for the nerds and their parents going to this
to which
academic
I say
thing.
He simply ought to play an immersive sim such as Thief or Thief 2, in which he would realize that there are other ways to infiltrate a building than going through the front door.
But you see, Thief and Thief 2 are too dark, and he'd use up all of the butane in his lighter before he got to the sprinkler system.
I would also argue that this is actually dramaturgically sound because, again, Marshall being the lore guy, because what happened the last time Rodney went on a roof?
He fell down.
He fell through the skylight, right?
Yeah.
So he has
can't
trauma.
get up that way.
Yeah.
He just can't. So you know what? Oh, God, I hate to say this, but I have
Are you going to hand it to him?
to hand it to Marshall Young. Oh, God,
Young?
that was awful.
Marshall Young?
Yeah.
Marshall Young?
He's the prequel to Younger.
He's Marshall. Please, Marshall Young was my father. Call me Marshall Younger.
Young. No, it's okay. It's okay because he had a kid named Mighty Joe. And it was there were some japes in that film as well.
Sure
if I
are
can
jungle
remember correctly.
japes even. So
some
Lucy confronts Sam about the fact that he's hanging out with Butch again.
Lucy Cunningham Schultz
Hey,
making
Sam.
a return.
Hi, Lucy. Can I ask you something? Sure. The other day I saw you at Finneman's with Brian Evans. Butch. Whatever. What's going on? I mean, what were you doing with him? Playing video games. I know, but with Brian? So? Well, he's, you know.
Gay!
You know. Yeah. I got a picture of her doing like a little limp wristed.
Yeah. You can hear the whoosh against the microphone.
Lucy's just by the way, your friend Brian, no, it's Butch. Okay, Brian,
Okay.
I just need to tell you something about him.
He prefers the company of men.
We have a Simpsons soundboard.
Good shit.
Yes!
But this would be, Max, you had mentioned earlier, just the extreme homoerotic overtones of these scenes between Sam and Butch. And this would be, I think, a good point to expand on that a little bit.
They do have this kind of like, there's just this sense of like, oh, their friendship is like forbidden and a secret. And like, I guess the context of that is like, oh, they're from two different worlds. Sam is a good kid and Butch is a bully. But like, it does kind of feel like it's standing in for something else.
Yeah.
Especially with all this talk of like pounding and nailing.
Well, especially because this episode's moral at the end is, you shouldn't hang out with them.
Yeah, it is really funny. I was not expecting the moral to be like, you should judge a book by its cover. Your initial impressions of people are always correct.
Yeah, and here's the thing though, like if I were to play script doctor for a moment, I would say that like Lucy's getting into some dangerous territory, right? Because Butch is a little bit unstable, right? He's sort of the bad kid from the other side of the track. So what I'm very much looking forward to is Butch convincing Sam to kill Lucy Cunningham Schultz and help him dismember the body, which will then, of course, get Butch thrown into jail for like 40 to life. And maybe one day Sam will finish his psychiatric treatment. I don't know, maybe move into his grandmother's house and through like some sort of series of heart-wrenching struggle to move on from this vortex of agony that enveloped his youth. He can try to figure out what happens next. I don't know, something like that? Is that something like that? Is that anything?
I see what you did there.
I feel like that's something. I feel like that'd make like, God, you know what? You know what, dude? It'd make a really good zine. I think I'm gonna.
Yeah. Everybody could join a mailing list.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Max, to have done that to you, because I know what it's like to have my writing compared to Adventures in Odyssey. Welcome to my nightmare.
Yeah, I do use a snippet of Adventures in Odyssey in the comic itself.
Yes. It was Eugene Going to Hell, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the Eugene Goes. Those are the only 2 Odyssey episodes that I've actually listened to in full, both parts of Mortal Coil, outside of normally I prefer to experience Odyssey through the sort of processing mechanism of Worst of All Possible.
Yeah, where you don't have to hear all 24 minutes of each episode.
Yeah, it's fucking interminable.
It's awful, isn't it?
Really boring.
I think it's good.
But the Eugene Goes to Hell thing was kind of fascinating to me because I don't know, everybody talks about this dark episode of a children's show traumatized me as a child, and Mortal Coil actually has the potential to legitimately traumatize a child.
Yeah. Right.
What I thought was so fascinating about it was this dogma of even people that you like, even people that are nice people, your friends, your neighbors, etc., if they don't accept Jesus Christ, they too will go to hell. And it was interesting to think what would that be like growing up with that in your head, governing every interaction you have with another person. That is the subtext of interacting with any non-Christian is, this person is going to go to hell.
Sam gets invited over to hang out with the Bones of Wrath because Butch is I do like this kid. Let's hang out with our whole friend group here. Because Sam,
with all of the lads,
Sam doesn't have any other friends aside from Lucy, I guess.
The Bones of Wrath they're much like the YMCA insofar as you can hang out with all the boys there.
Young man,
and much like the YMCA,
he prefers the company of men.
So the Bones of Wrath do this thing to Sam where it's when you're hanging out with the drug dealer and proving you're not a cop by snorting the supply.
Where
they're like, come on, man, tell a joke. And because Sam is a good Christian boy, like so many on the right, he only has one.
You got here just in time. We were telling jokes. You got any?
Jokes?
Sure. Tell a joke. Just one.
Well, I only know one.
Is it funny?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
All right. What did the mother bullet say to the daddy bullet?
What?
We're gonna have a BB.
Are you done?
Well, yeah.
So then they're like, no, that's
it's daddy.
That's not not what a joke is. Did you ever hear the one about the traveling salesman and the farmer's daughter?
Sam is actively trying to make this relationship work, but I don't understand why Sam likes Butch at all. No. Really, I don't understand why this is something that he wants. I know that Butch needs to get those tickets, but what does Sam get out of this?
Yeah. I think that sublimated gay attraction is really the only possible reading.
Yeah.
Right. I guess. Yeah, they both at one point liked baseball.
There's a mention of a 500-foot home run.
Yeah,
at
Wrigley.
That's wild. just to point that out, 95. A 500-foot home run that basically doesn't happen. Maybe once a year if you're lucky. This past year, the number one, the furthest hit home run was Shohei Ohtani. He hit for 495 feet.
Oof.
500 just doesn't really happen.
Well, actually, the AIO wiki takes its own special interest into that as well because they point out, exactly how many 500-foot home runs have happened in Wrigley, and they've all happened after this episode aired. But there are 2 that could have been classified as 500-foot home runs. But, there's always controversy about the measurements on those sorts of things. So you're not the only one who has brought this up, Josh, just to make you know.
Okay, thank you.
You are
really
not alone.
Interesting detour. Yeah. Just absolutely scintillating. Really has a lot.
Can't believe I'm getting roasted on my own show. Oh well.
So anyway, we get to the dirty jokes now. We get the real grilling happening. Rodney's holding a knife to poor Sam's throat to get him to tell a single dirty joke.
That's right. You gotta.
Just say something about rubber buns. Mention Johnny Humperharder. I swear to God.
When we're talking about jokes, we don't mean little kid cutesy jokes. We're talking about something that'll make Rusty here blush.
You want me to tell a dirty joke?
Yes!
But I don't know any.
Come on, everybody knows some dirty jokes.
No, really, I don't. Besides, it's wrong to tell dirty jokes.
Oh, come on.
And this is like Donna being in the vicinity of a house as it burns down.
Yeah.
Where it's telling a dirty joke is one of the worst things you can do. This is true moral degeneracy. This is something every youth pastor falls back on. is like, so you know how sometimes you're with your friends and then you start telling jokes and then you start telling dirty jokes. You know the kind. Johnny Deeper, aka Humper Harder, rubber buns and liquor, or maybe rubber buns and ketchup. Who knows? Ketchup and liquor? Ketchup and rubber buns? Liquor and more liquor?
Are you having a stroke? What?
Of course I am.
Yeah.
Of course I am.
This guy's jacking off.
I'm having a stroke in the other sense.
Well, no, but actually I did want to point that up, right? That I do think that some of the concern about dirty jokes ultimately does come down to an expression of sexuality, which once again does tie into the homoeroticism piece here, right?
Right. I really want them to cut away. Like, it's just like, okay, I got one for you. And it goes, na, da, 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 da. And we cut back and we just hear Sam say, the aristocrats.
I made the exact same note. God damn you, AJ. I was like, Rodney's like, so this family shows up in a talent agency.
I would just love Rodney Rathbone to be like, oh, I didn't mean that dirty. I have to go home. You just hear Butch like crying, sobbing in the fetal position.
This is something that I also remember from my own childhood, right? I have a very specific memory, actually. This as often happens with these fucking Wits Endless Summer episodes.
This is why I do it.
This reminded me of something, which was that I was like doing a Bible study one time, and the Lord put a spirit on my heart of repentance because there was this video, there's like a flash animation that was just the mildest thing, but it was like there was a joke about a vagina in there. And I remember just being so overwhelmed with the weight of guilt that I had laughed at this web animation with a joke about a vagina in it. And so there was like the ways to apply the learning from this Bible lesson or whatever. And I distinctly remember writing out like, one of the things that I am going to do is not watch that video anymore. And today
I'm deleting
I went
my
back and watched
Newgrounds
it again because I was like, oh, I should watch again. It was not titillating, nor was it funny. So there you go.
You gotta name it, Josh.
It was a Weeble and Bob animation. It was the first one that they did about Christmas. I know. Yeah, I'm old.
Man, maybe I've never been online. I think like I'm trying to remember. I got in trouble for telling dirty jokes when I was a kid. That was the thing. I remember one of the first things I did in like maybe 6 or 7th grade.
Were you writing foul limericks?
Well, Brian, funny you should mention that. It wasn't a limerick. It was not a limerick. Fuck. I did rewrite the lyrics to Giants in the Sky from Into the Woods to Be Giant in My Pants.
Okay,
and I got in trouble. Well, here's the thing about it was that I got in trouble from the people from like from the people who ran the youth theater that I was a part of. But afterwards, the parents came outside and they took me aside and they're like, but how's it go though? And they made me sing the whole song in its entirety for them because they thought it was fucking hilarious. I don't remember how it goes, but I do remember the bit at the end. They are big, tall, terrible, awesome, veiny, wonderful giant. I would like cut out for that one. And it was just like, that was it. And you know what? As a consequence of those adults laughing at that, you all must now suffer every time we do a musical episode to listen to me rewriting the lyrics to the song.
I had a childhood incident. I think I was like 11 years old at the time, and my siblings and I had gone to stay with my grandparents for the summer. My grandfather and his wife were like evangelical Christians who were very devout. Yeah. Like my grandfather was born again later in life. And I was actually, after this visit, I was banned from returning to their home ever again. And they said it was because I had written swear words in the sand to show the neighbor kids. But I have a very strong suspicion that that's not what this was actually about, because my grandfather also made a brief reference to the fact that he thought I had viewed pornography on his computer, which was true. But what I had actually been doing was reading lesbian, like erotic My Little Pony fan fiction. And to this day, like, I think he didn't tell my parents the specifics of it because he was just too confused about what it even was. And like to this day, I still wonder, like, what did he even think he was looking at? Like, it kind of haunts me. I can never ask him now because he's passed away. So I just have to live with that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to any sort of illicit or obscene or, otherwise body content, right? there's really just this thing throughout the culture that it almost like wants to pretend that if we don't acknowledge it, then it won't be there, you know?
Yeah.
And what this does then is it leads to an incredible amount of pent up frustration, right? And guilt and this feeling of like, well, surely these feelings that I have and these things that I'm reading or seeing or whatever, like I am the only one who is experiencing this. I'm the only one who's doing this. And what I'm doing is so fucking wrong. And you develop a complex about it after a while. And that's exactly what this episode is encouraging you to do, is that if you want to engage in something that's a little bit off color, even a little bit ribald, let alone getting into actual desire and things like that. It's just like, no, shut it down. Shut it all down.
So this episode ends with, Butch goes to the banquet. He sneaks off into the bathroom. He sets off the sprinkler system, fucks everything up. And then he and Sam have like this whole dramatic blow up where everything ends like shit.
Yeah. You guys set off the sprinkler system, didn't you? You set me up. You pretended you were my friend. You tricked me. I hope you enjoyed your prank. See ya.
You know, it's so easy for you. You've got your Peter Pan parents and your wonderful report cards and your cheerleader friends. Well, some of us don't have it that easy, okay?
Yeah, I know. But why do you have to make things so hard? Being in the bones of Rath doesn't help anything.
Why do you have to make things so
I
complicated?
don't understand. Those guys are my friends. And I don't have many of those.
How about me? I wanted to be your friend.
But not anymore.
Why?
All I know is that I'd still be your friend if you would quit being Butch and start being Brian again.
Brian's gone.
Interesting.
That's too bad.
Interesting.
Let me know if he comes back. I miss him.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Butch.
I had to keep the
So good. Oh no!
It's like an anime. Like it's very
I immediately thought of the moment in Fight Club where he's like, Tyler's not here. Tyler went away.
Rip to Brian.
Peter Pan's parents were objectively terrible.
No. He's not saying
Wasn't
they're
that
Peter
the whole
Pan's
thing?
parents. He's saying they are Peter Pan parents. They are parents who are Peter Pan. Both of them.
Eternally youthful?
Yeah, they're children. He's raised by children. Yeah.
Is that what he's saying?
And that's a great child.
What is happening? What does that mean?
What doesn't it mean, AJ? The possibilities are endless. Maybe you need to open up the door to your endless imagination, just like a one Mr. J.M. Barrie did in his day. Maybe you should be admirable like Crichton, his titular Crichton.
Wait a minute.
No.
It's
another one that he
I'm
wrote.
thinking of Wendy's parents are terrible. Peter
fine.
Pan's parents are dead. Isn't that the whole point? He's an orphan?
I thought he was just like a
Peter
demon.
Pan doesn't have parents. That's why he's in Neverland.
No, that's why they're not Peter Pan's parents. They're Peter Pan parents. They're parents who are Peter Pan.
Yeah, the parents are Peter Pan.
It's like Peter.
It's so hard for you to understand.
No, wait. If Peter Pan parents picked a pack of pickled peppers.
So you know there's Peter Pan peanut butter, right?
Yeah, Peter Pan
it's
peanut
not
butter.
Peter Pan's peanut butter. It's yours if you
No, it's
buy
not Peter
it,
Pan's peanut
right?
butter.
Or it belongs
No.
to the store or
It's
whatever.
peanut butter that tastes like Peter Pan.
Yeah, it's made out of Peter Pan.
It's made out of Peter Pan.
Just like these parents are.
Their parents made out of the
They're Peter
out
Pan
of the flesh
peanut butter
of Peter
parents
Pan.
picking a pack of pickled peppers in
That's
Oxford,
right.
New Jersey.
What is this?
The aristocrats.
Oh, we're gonna get even more insane in the second half. How about that?
They gesture at like Butch having like a rough childhood or a difficult life, and like that's why he's like this. They offer zero specifics whatsoever.
No, his mom
which is kind of
seems
fascinating
fine
to me.
His mom seems no different from Sam's mom. Maybe she's also Peter Pan.
I'm surprised that like they didn't take the opportunity to slip in like, oh, he comes from a broken home or like some other talking point like that. There's just nothing.
Yeah, like they could have.
They have people in Odyssey. They have kids already who do kind of come from broken homes. And they could have used for this episode, but instead we just meet this kid who is like, his name being Butch, like he's not as bad as Rodney. Do you know what I mean? Like Rodney Rathbone is just like mischief incarnate. Butch is just kind of half in, half out. And sure, at the end he like fully commits to being a bad kid. But
his japes are going to be out of control from now on.
Like,
well, AJ,
Donna has done more property damage
AJ,
than Butch
really
has.
interesting that you say this about Butch. about who he is and about how he has made his decisions, and perhaps that he might not be totally sold on the life that he has chosen for himself. Perhaps Butch is going to come back. Maybe we're going to see a little bit more of our friend Brian. Maybe he is not the worst of all possible Brians after all. Because I am, obviously. But
wait, hold on. That's really interesting. Hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just got an email for our sponsor this week, and the email address says Butch?
Oh my God.
Yeah, what's poppin', home listeners? Town Rapscallion and Little Stinker, Butch Evans here. Are you tired of dealing with the doldrums of modern society? Does the idea of a suit and tie make you want to blow chunks? You ever find yourself staring into the middle distance saying, boy howdy, I sure could use a good pounding? Then get your bony butt down to the abandoned Rack's roast beef near Gower's Field and join the Bones of Rath today. Voted Odyssey's #1 gang of roving street children since 1987. The Bones of Rath ain't just a bunch of disaffected youths aged 6 to 16. We're also a community-minded organization with a focus on sustainable living, equity for all, and giving the dweebs of Odyssey a one-way ticket to Bone Town. We do all sorts of community outreach, poundins, pranks, and prank poundins. So join the Bones of Rath today and take part in our initiation ceremony, where we take you to the Odyssey Cemetery for some light grave robbing. Can't join the Bones of Rath without stealing some bones. Come to think of it, there have been a bunch more graves up there lately. Fresh ones too, Rodney said. I asked him how he knew, and he said, trust me, my dad knows graves. No markers or anything. No rhyme or reason, just mound after mound of upturned earth. So we dig one of them up, get our hands on some sweet, sweet bones. And what's weird was the body, or corpse, or whatever, it didn't have no face, just a mouth. This huge gaping mouth, filled ear to ear with too many teeth. And Rodney and I, we were like, what the heck, right? So's we digs up some other graves, and this corpse don't have no face neither, just that same mouth again. So's we dig up another, a face full of ears, another, a face full of nostrils, another, a face overflowing with dull, lifeless eyes. So I sits on the grass and I says to Rodney, I says, what is all this? And Rodney looks at me and says, you kidding me? It's a freaking gold mine! What are teeth but the bones of the face? But I'm not so sure. I think maybe something bad's going on over there, and I'm gonna figure it out. Or my name ain't... Who's there? I said, who's there? I warn you, I got cherry bombs. Ah!
Ah! Oh, please don't break me, I have a weak heart.
Lorne Ligorium? What's a goody two-shoes like you doing at Bones of Rath HQ?
Looking for you. Well, not you explicitly, but
out
like
with it,
like
dweeb, before I start pounding.
I hear you know how to blow stuff up.
Maybe. Have been known to dabble in cherry bombs from time to time. Vitalizer when the mood strikes me. Who wants to know?
Me, obviously. And my friends, we need a lot of firepower and fast.
Whoa there, champ. Pump the brakes a bit. What exactly are you looking to blow up?
I can't tell you that, but let's just say that if we pull it off, it'll be the greatest prank this town's ever seen.
Oh, a prank, you say? Well, you have definitely piqued my interest. Okay, Lord Ligorium, let's get to work.
I'm recording from my boyfriend, so I don't actually have it on me, but this past year I bought a piece of untranslated Japanese Detroit Become Human hentai, like a little like self-published comic book from a very aggressive hentai salesman.
So this aggressive hentai salesman, what are the pressure tactics that an aggressive hentai an aggressive hentai salesman uses.
I mean, first off, he's like, shouting like a carnival barker from the hentai booth, trying to get people to come and stop. And then once you get there and you're perusing the hentai,
right.
He'll be like, oh yeah, I think he said to my boyfriend who was not buying hentai at the hentai booth, like, oh, your balls are going to be full tonight. His balls are going to be empty and your balls are going to be full. It was a shit like that.
Hold on.
This was in English?
This was the hentai salesman was in English speaking. The hentai was almost exclusively in Japanese.
Yeah, I was just assuming you were hearing a bunch of stuff in a language you maybe didn't understand, but it was just very, very convincing just from the tone and the cadence.
I'm imagining it in sort of the old school carnival barker voice where it's like, now listen here, kid. You can come and you can get this world-class hentai. Your balls will be so drained you won't be able to jack off again for 2 weeks.
I've had people come to me, old housewives, young maidens, and they have said that their pussy has been wet for 30 days. 30 days straight, not a dry pussy in the house.
Like, you're not as far off as you might think. And also, I want to clarify that this guy is like, I don't know, like maybe in like his 40s or 50s. This is like a middle-aged hentai salesman.
Sure.
I feel like that's an important detail.
Gil from The Simpsons.
Another detail is that somebody from like someone in a Shadow the Hedgehog costume showed up.
AJ just got
like
completely rock hard just now.
Bought like a stack of, I think it was like Yu-Gi-Oh porn that was like this high. These were not cheap. It was like $30 for one comic book because they're imported.
Wow.
So I can't even imagine like the stacks that this person was dropping on Yu-Gi-Oh hentai, which unless they were fluent in Japanese, they couldn't even read.
Right, it's worth it because to get your balls free, to completely
to fully drain them. You need a cleanse every once in a while,
Absolutely, absolutely.
So in the second half of this episode, we have decided to not talk about Adventures in Odyssey anymore, and instead we will be reviewing
Welcome to Hentai Cast.
Rare hentai. No, unfortunately, we have to go back to the shit here. I mean, I guess we don't have to, but I feel like we should. So we're going to be moving right on to the truth about Zachary.
We're hopping back just a tiny bit. So these episodes all happen consecutively, but this is episode number 299, and it is also by Marshall Younger.
And a man known as Paul Malm. I don't know who Paul Malm is, but
the rural juror.
Exactly. I thought his name was Paul Lalm. Like it was
according to AIO Wiki.
No, it's
according to AIO Wiki. Paul Malm has exactly one credit, and it's this episode.
I'm
so let's
assuming
fucking go.
Because Paul McCusker also co-wrote Pen Pals, the one about Jenny, the blind character.
Right.
He co-wrote that with someone named Van Trapp.
I love his family singers.
Hold on, Josh, we've actually got them here tonight. The Von Trapp family singers.
They're gone. Thank you for setting me up for that one, AJ. Oh, I love a Sound of Music reference. Yeah, is this like a diversity consultant or something?
This might have been a consultant of some kind because I cannot find Van Trapp or Paul Malm. I can't find them anywhere.
Well, if I were a disability consultant and I had worked on this episode, I think I would want to use like an Alan Smithy.
Oh, no doubt. I would never want my name
Yeah.
attached to this kind of bullshit because the truth about Zachary is an episode that deals extremely sensitively with the question of physical disability.
Yeah.
With all of the care and tact that Adventures in Odyssey is known for.
Hey, this is Brian cutting in during the middle of the edit because I did, in fact, find out who Paul Malm was. No, he was not writing under a pseudonym, and no, he was not a disability consultant. He was actually the owner of a church supply company, and I guess through that got a contact with Focus on the Family where he had submitted a few scripts, I guess on spec. This one was the only one that got picked up and made into a full-blown episode of Adventures in Odyssey, and he ended up not cashing the check because he felt that the script was changed so much that he didn't recognize it as his own work. And apparently he wasn't even aware that Zachary then became a recurring character on the series. Why do I know this? Well, it turns out that Paul Malm's son, Zach, who, yes, the character is named after, he has a podcast called Veterans of Culture Wars. And in their 5th episode, they actually talk about the truth about Zachary. So we're going to link to that in our show notes. Van Trapp is still AWOL.
No, please.
Far less care intact than they provided for the Jenny episode, which of course was written by Paul McCusker, a much better writer overall.
To get into it here, we meet a kid named Zachary. Zachary's got a busted old wheelchair that he uses, and he has just moved to town, right?
Yeah.
And he really fucking hates Odyssey.
Yeah, it's just him and his mom. Yeah.
He calls Odyssey a sorry excuse for a city. And my note there was, with you, brother. I am right there with you. But yeah, basically Zachary is salty with his mother about the whole situation.
It'll get better, Zach. When you go to your new school, you'll make friends.
Oh, yeah, lots of friends. Everybody's gonna want to be pals with a kid in a wheelchair. I'd really be a lot of fun to play with.
I don't want to hear that.
You never want to hear that.
Stop it! Don't you sit there and act like this is easy for me.
You're right, Mom. You're the one in the wheelchair.
You will not talk to me like that. I am doing the best I can, and you better start trying to do the same. You will go to school, and you will go to therapy, and you will make the best of this situation. Is that clear?
Yes.
Good. Now eat your dinner and then get ready for bed. You have to get up early for school tomorrow.
This is 2 minutes in.
Right before this happens, he also knocks over just an obscene amount of boxes. Like I took the note, like it's just like what you hear 1 or 2 boxes fall, and then they keep talking, and in the background, like 8 more boxes topple over.
Oh, Zachary, you've knocked over my Rube Goldberg machine. I spent so long setting that
Now
up.
my alarm is going to go off 6 hours early.
My toast isn't going to pop out of the toaster.
Thoughts here about I'll never be able to sharpen my pencil again. Thoughts here.
It's the mom from McGee and Me, by the way. This is the mom from McGee and Me. So we got the whole cast here.
There we go. So,
Wow.
but yeah, thoughts about this scene and just this way of setting up a character. I found this so strange.
Honestly, I was just relieved that like there was that Zachary Zachary rules. I love Zachary.
Yeah,
Shout out
Zach is pretty cool.
Zachary.
Yeah.
He does nothing wrong. Like, to just have a character with, like, a single character trait, which is that he's kind of a pain in the ass, and he's, like, depressed about being in a wheelchair. It's like, okay, thank God, at least that's something, as opposed to sort of the like, perfectly smooth, spherical qualities of the other.
All of the smooth
They're just, like,
children of
geometric
Odyssey.
shapes in my head.
Spherical children.
The AI children of Odyssey that are just a little bit.
Who are these children coming down?
It is nice that he talks back to his mom and that he has a good point about it.
Honestly.
And he is obviously framed as being in the wrong here, but what he's saying is sort of viscerally true and is a true emotion that kids can have being frustrated to be put into this scenario.
And what we learn later about the circumstances that they're in, it also makes sense that his mom lashes back out at him because she's at the end of her rope here.
Right.
It's not a good scene.
Again, it's a little too much. I feel like that extra layer is a little much for this episode to handle.
This is also, I think, a thing of like, if Paul McCusker had written this episode, it would just feel a bit more real. Whereas there's something about the way that this is calibrated where it just feels like melodrama for the most part.
Yeah, especially in the way that Sam interacts with other kids as we continue to go through this episode.
Yeah.
That's right. Because you said Sam, you mean Zach, right?
Zach, whatever. They're all the same kid.
Who fucking cares?
And Zach, by the way, speaking of all being the same kid, Zachary Sellers is played by Chris Castile, who appeared once before as that kid in Iowa when Eugene and Bernard were on their road trip. Chris Castile is the kid who was on Step by Step and also Hey Arnold.
Right.
Yeah.
His dad was absolutely terrifying.
Yes.
Right.
It's a really fucking dark-sided father and the prize pig. Yeah. Same kid.
We then get Zach at school and we get another Odyssey standby, which is the swishy teacher. We love a swishy teacher.
Yeah. This is Phil Lawler
completely
doing one of the worst performances he's done in the show, I think.
Which is saying something.
Yeah.
And we learn that Zach is from the city of Richland.
Yeah.
And
where the land is rich.
We just get a whole bunch of bullshit here. Like he's like, oh, I don't want to be here. And they're like, but you have to speak up in class.
He
he's
shows
like,
up and then Lucy, and he's like, hi. And then Lucy's like, oh, excuse me. When we have new students, we like to put them in front of the class so they can tell everyone about themselves.
Lucy is 100% the kid who would have been like, teacher, you haven't asked us to hand in the work from yesterday. Like, she's that fucking kid.
You know, I got a lot of pushback when I was first introduced to Lucy Cunningham Schultz because I said I do not like this child. I find her to be extremely annoying and a goody two shoes. And there was some pushback to that.
Yeah, because she's a child, AJ. Come on.
Okay. As a character in a fictional TV show, as a character in a fictional audio drama, I do find her to be incredibly annoying, and it has not gone away since. But there are some really big Lucy Cunningham Schultz defenders out there. So my question for you, Max, is pro or anti Lucy Cunningham Schultz?
This is kind of I agreed the character as written is really grating, but I feel like I understand the role she's supposed to play in the show as like sort of like a moral sense. I don't know, like I feel like in an ideal world she would be like more of a Lisa Simpson type character, but because she has to be in line with like the ethical world of Adventures in Odyssey, that inevitably makes her really annoying.
Yeah. She is the mouthpiece of the show, and maybe that's why I respond so negatively.
Well, and she's such an adult, especially in this episode, the way that she and Zachary, who I'll get the name correctly this time, the way that they are written, I mean, it's in the title, the way that they're written is like they have grown-up banter with each other.
Yeah.
They do not talk.
They do,
And Marshall Younger wrote the other two episodes we listened to before, and the kids more or less talk like kids. They don't ring the alarm bells of like, this is just weird bullshit writing. But these exchanges that Lucy has throughout this episode, it's already weird that she like works for not just a school newspaper, but the real newspaper. You know, we've had some odd plots with her already, but here it really crosses the line into just irritating bad writing.
Yeah, well, and because a piece of it is that Lucy is incentivized to get to know Zachary better on multiple levels, right? There's the fact that because she's fucking annoying, wanted to pester him into going up in front of the class, and then that didn't go well, so now she's even more interested. But there's also the fact that I guess for her assignment for the school paper, for which she is also getting a grade, she has to interview him?
My school didn't have a paper, so I'm not familiar with the actual machinery of this stuff.
You didn't get graded for that shit. It was an extracurricular.
It's they have to have some reason why she's like so dogged to get this interview, right? And
but then she's
get
not
that grades.
Like she's like, I could do this interview, but I could also just not do it if you don't want to. And then he becomes the engine for it moving forward.
Yeah, but I don't know. I got the sense throughout the entire episode that it was really her pushing because he is so against talking to anyone about anything. He's Bartleby the Scrivener for most of this fucking episode.
Yeah, a weird thing about this episode is that like he is constantly anticipating people bringing up his disability and bringing up the fact that he's in a wheelchair, but nobody ever does it. Lucy doesn't do it. Which, like, I think that an obvious way to go with this episode is that, like, she does bring it up or she is curious about it. Like, you know, kids can be jerks or kids can be nosy. Lucy is certainly, like, characterized as nosy elsewhere.
Yeah.
But instead she doesn't do that, which means that the entire episode is just Zachary being mad at her for, like, no particular plot relevant reason. I guess because she's annoying, but, like, we the listener aren't supposed to think she's annoying. We're supposed to like her.
Right.
So... It once again, it's like there's this weird like absence of what the obvious conflict of the episode would seem to be. Like it just doesn't happen.
Right. No, it's Zachary is more just kind of an awful kid. Like he just likes to start fights. That's where he's at in his life. He just doesn't care. Lucy is not really even pushing him on it. She's saying, "Oh yeah, I can back away," and he's like, "You know what? Fuck it." And then he just tells her like a lie about why he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah, it feels very much like Mrs. Erskine at the end of the episode where she's just like, we just wanted to check in on how you're doing okay. Like no one in Odyssey is actually doing the thing that Zachary is lashing out against, which it seems to me like it is the Odyssey writer's opinion that it's just like, well, these kids in wheelchairs who complain that all ever people ask about are their wheelchair. We as good Christians actually don't do that. And they're just being very dramatic about it.
Yeah, this is strange, right? It's hard to know to what extent this is intended to be a character choice because there, I think, is a world in which you could have this choice and have it make sense in the context of here is somebody who always has his defenses up to an irrational extent. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I think that's totally a fair choice that one could make. But the show doesn't really know what side it wants to come down on in terms of how others ought to perceive this character because he is written as somebody who is very much the other.
Yeah.
There's no world in which Zachary is going to become a fully integrated member of the Odyssey community because if he was, they wouldn't fucking write him like this. And this gets me back to something that always frustrates me about this fucking show, is that when somebody shows up who is intended to teach you a lesson about what it means to be a good Christian, they are always treated as being somebody who's almost like a fucking alien. And when you combine that sort of socialization or perception of socialization with the disability, it feels like a real fucking toxic brew, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's unpleasant. It's like uncomfortable to sit through.
Yeah, and they're just trying to be nice to him. Right. And they're the ones that are actually repelling all of our good Christian values. You know, maybe if they were a little bit more Christian, they would open up. Like, it's very insidious.
Yeah.
The biggest surprise of this episode to me is that Wit's End is wheelchair accessible.
Right. It's an old Victorian mansion.
Yeah.
Wait. How does he get upstairs to go look at the
There's
train?
a brief mention of an elevator that is never mentioned again for the entire series.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and
Wait,
by the way,
he put the elevator through the no-no door?
We all know, by the way, based on who Wit is, that he would fight ADA accommodations tooth and nail. He would be like, this is a historical building. It would be an undue financial burden to try to repurpose this, landmarked building. We would need to,
Meanwhile,
destroy
he's
so
building
many
a
things.
Zeppelin hangar in the back.
No, exactly. Like, come the fuck on. You think that this guy cares about accommodations? Get real.
I just want to throw in a little example of just like how Lucy and Zachary talk to each other, just to drive home my point of what all this is.
Would you mind if I ate lunch with you?
Fine.
I just wanted to ask you something about...
Look, if you'll leave me alone, I will personally go up to your editor and tell him how hard you've worked on this interview and that I've been impossible to work with. That'll save your grade, right?
I'm not interested in my grade.
Then why do you keep on bugging me?
I just want to ask you a question.
Go on. I doubt I'll answer it, but go on.
I doubt I'll answer it?
I doubt I'll answer it, but go on. Like...
Go on.
This is like a workplace drama between 40-year-olds?
It hit me. I thought it was bad. You may be shocked to learn this. I can sympathize that it is difficult to write child characters. Like there was a chapter in my comic where I was writing two of the characters as 13-year-olds. Right. And it was a little bit tough for me to like look back through my life and be like, well, what do 13-year-olds talk about? Yeah. But this is usually a problem that I solve by like thinking about like character details and like what does this character like do on a day-to-day basis? What are their interests? What are their hobbies? What are the things they like talking about in conversation?
Yeah.
And like, like what kind of like, milieu have they grown up in and like how has it like shaped them as a person so far? And like Odyssey just doesn't have that depth of character writing like ever in any respect.
Yeah.
So I can see why it would be hard for them to like write good dialogue for like these characters. I guess like if they're going to write the children as little adults, they could at least do so in a way that's they could at least try to do it like cleverly or in a way that's like heightened instead of just having it be it still feels very bland and perfunctory.
Yeah. Because here's the thing about this episode. It's not actually about the kids. It's not about Zachary. It's not about teaching. What it really is an excuse for Marshall Younger to clarify why her name is Lucy Cunningham Schultz.
Yes.
That is all he cares about. It is what he builds this entire episode around.
It's
I
wild.
get it. As a lore guy, I get it.
Because, for many episodes, she was Lucy Schultz, and then sometimes she was Lucy Cunningham. She had a dad. He worked with George Barkley, but I guess also worked at the newspaper now. This was him creating a lore-specific reason to those mistakes, to why those mistakes happened. And it turns out that Lucy has a dead dad,
What also stuck out to me about the explanation for Lucy's hyphenated name is that, like, there's no way that, like, it's because her mom wanted to keep her last name. That would never fly in Odyssey. Which is the usual reason why somebody has a hyphenated last name. Like, when I was a kid, most of my friends had hyphenated last names because they came from families with those kind of, like, egalitarian principles.
Right.
Although I would also note that, like, just for brevity's sake, a lot of them would drop one name or the other sometimes, depending on, like, which name was easier to say, or like, you know, it's like, it's not a weird thing for somebody to have a hyphenated surname that they sometimes only use part of. But I guess Marshall Younger was just really like foaming at the mouth, waiting to explain that this entire time.
Yeah.
He loves a dramatic solution.
And it really is dramatic.
So this is him, because he lied to Lucy before about what happened to his legs, he just starts feeding her a bunch of other just bullshit things because I don't know, he needs someone to talk to.
I had surgery on my legs last month because I tore some ligaments. There. You're not writing this down.
I don't believe you.
Okay, fine. I was skiing and I fell off a mountain.
Is that the truth?
I was bungee jumping and the cable broke.
What really happened?
I was filming a rock video and stepped on some dry ice.
Why won't you tell me the truth?
Because the truth is boring. The truth is stupid. It was a stupid car accident, okay? A stupid car accident on a rainy night with a drunk driver who ran into us and put me in a wheelchair and killed my dad. There, are you satisfied?
This is too
There's
much.
Your hot story.
This is just too much.
But I mean, I think that, you know, there's something about a story of acquired disability rather than disability that you were born with. It's something that has happened to him recently. There's a reason he's mad about it. We don't necessarily need the dead dad in addition to that, but so there was this whole thing earlier where Eugene is gone and they keep like conspicuously talking about how Eugene is not there, and it's like, we get it, Will Ryan wasn't available that day, but Zachary was able to fix the trains. The trains upstairs were broken. He's a friend of trains, as we say in the industry.
We love it.
My notes just say train autism !
Is there something wrong? The coal car on this train.
Excuse me?
The coal car is wrong.
Wrong?
Yeah, every other car is authentic. But this is definitely wrong.
Come on.
This is a replica of a late 19th century steam engine train, right?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure.
This type of coal car wasn't used until 1935.
Come on.
How do you know that?
Trains used to be a hobby of mine.
Well, and it turns out it wasn't just a hobby of his. His dad was like a hardcore foamer.
Yeah, it runs in the family.
His dad didn't even work for the rail, which they could have just made that his thing. But no, his dad is like a guy who would go down to the station and memorize the schedules. And so he also developed an interest in trains. But Lucy is telling him, oh, you fixed the train set. You're so smart. You're such a clever person. Like, you should be grateful. You should be grateful for the life that you still have.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about how fortunate you are.
Fortunate? Are you nuts? I'm in a wheelchair.
But you still have your whole life ahead of you. You have intelligence, skills.
You're crazy.
You're alive, Zach.
You call this alive? What do you know anyway? How can you stand there on your two good legs and talk about all I have in this wheelchair?
At least you're here. I'd give anything if my dad were here in a wheelchair.
Oh, boy.
What?
Oh.
Why would you want your dad in a wheelchair?
Because at least he'd be alive.
What?
It's a correct reaction, yeah.
This isn't about you, Lucy.
I know what it's like.
His dad is also dead. It's not
How
like
could you? All you
That
care
dad
about
club,
is
let's
feeling
go.
sorry for yourself.
Oh my God! What the fuck? What just happened?
My father was also named Bort. Yeah, I mean, this is such a like spectacularly bad scene on so many levels. To fall back on like the terrible cliche of like, oh, you're in a wheelchair, but you're actually really lucky. Like, first of all, the idea of like he's disabled, but he's also really smart about trains. And like this idea that if you have a disability, you have to have this like compensatory talent.
Yes.
Like you have to be gifted or special in like some other way to make up for the fact that you're in a wheelchair, as if, you know, it's some kind of personal fault. You know, it is that classic kind of like very special episode thing, and I guess I shouldn't expect Odyssey to know better than that, but it's like, wow, that's really rough. Like, what was their disability consultant, I guess, was just sleeping on the job.
Well, again, it's like they did a better job with the episode with Jenny.
Didn't like, I think when I was listening to you guys talk about the Jenny episode on an earlier episode of Wits Endless Summer, there was some discussion of how like blind people were sort of like a periphery demographic for Adventures in Odyssey.
They listened to the show. Yeah.
I guess they just didn't have that same kind of concern for like wheelchair users. Because like that's not a significant part of their demographic, or at least they don't perceive it that way.
I feel like a big difference here too is that they really didn't, in the episode about Jenny, right? There were a few pieces about what it's actually like to live as a blind person.
Yeah.
There, there was nothing specific here about what it looks like when you are a wheelchair user, what the various impediments in daily life might be like, or how that makes you feel, or how you're perceived, other than, again, the way that he talks about how he thinks other people perceive him, which comes across as more of a complex than a real concern.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel grounded in anything.
Well, it sounds like pull yourself up by your bootstraps a little bit, because it's just like you're in a wheelchair, but like, buck up, buddy, you're alive. And it's like, he can feel mad about this. He can feel sad about this. He has every right. His dad died.
AJ, he can't feel bitter.
Yeah.
Bitterness.
We come back to this time and time again. Yeah.
Once again, that topic rears its hideous head. That topic of bitterness, of letting your sadness become sin.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a form of degeneracy, like hanging out with the wrong kids if they're too ethnic or whatever. They tell traveling salesman
house,
jokes,
which gets burned out eventually.
So he's at the line. He's at the threshold where he could become a true sinner, or he could be pulled back by being guilted by Lucy for also having a dead dad.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It ends in such a strange place. We do get a nice adult contemporary rendition of the Adventures in Odyssey theme, though.
Yes.
Oh. What a jam.
Kixie 96.5. That's for my San Diego listeners.
Yeah.
So, Max, any other big takeaways from this episode?
Yeah, something that comes to mind for me is, like, if they address the issue of accessibility, which is, like, I'm not disabled myself, but I have friends who are disabled. I know somebody who is a wheelchair user, and, like, that seems like a pretty major concern. It's like, it's difficult for me to go places because, like, there's stairs or whatever that I can't climb. And the thing is that if Odyssey, like, addressed that as a legitimate concern at all, then they would have to consider, like, for example, like, having a complex about, or, like, being nervous that people will ask you about being in a wheelchair, that's a personal problem.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility is a structural problem that will be solved by regulations, which we know how they feel about regulations over at Focus on the Family.
Yeah.
And they can't acknowledge the existence of a structural problem because that would require structural solutions as opposed to, like, being a good Christian, which is their solution for literally everything.
Yes.
And which they'd already solved it. They have an elevator and a ramp.
Yeah, they have an elevator that we've never seen before and we'll never see again.
Well, of course you can't, because it would go down to the sub-basement and you can't go down there because it's hard to tell if that room will be there on that particular day. It does move around a lot.
I am pleased to tell you all that just like Jenny, Zachary will return.
Oh, really?
We'll have more episodes with Zachary very soon. Yeah. So this is not the only story of disability related to Zachary in particular that we are going to tell.
Oh, yay.
And so maybe we will address some of those structural what's that? Never mind. We're not going to nothing structural.
Got it. Okay. Very good.
Nothing big, structural or Bailey, but yeah.
We have certainly taken enough damage to our sanity points
let's
in
go
this
to a
episode.
good writer.
So we'll go to a fun one. Let's do a fun one.
Let's do a silly one.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, everybody, just a quick note. Where's Connie?
Connie's not in this episode.
It's been like 8 episodes, and there hasn't been Connie in any of them.
I don't know. Maybe Katie was busy. She was probably
So this fourth episode that we're going to listen to today, When Bad Isn't So Good, is episode 263.
What kind of a title is that? I don't normally critique these titles, but
this one's really rough. That
sounds
one
like
doesn't.
Google Translate gone wrong.
The truth about Zachary, that's fine. The good, the bad, and Butch. Okay, I get it. Preacher's Kid. To the point.
Yeah, you got it.
When bad isn't so good. Is it referencing
You're telling
something?
me that bad isn't good?
Sometimes.
Well, it's not so good.
Not all the time.
So
it's very conditional.
Maybe it's because, like, in the 90s, kids were saying bad to mean good.
Oh, like that's bad.
Yeah,
like Michael Jackson.
Maybe that's what they were trying to get on. But
Possible.
I don't know.
I was gonna say that maybe it's a reference to the Toronto, Canada jazz group Bad, Not Good.
I think it's that. I think
that's
you're
nothing.
Right. Yeah, no, that's
fucking
it.
nothing.
No, that's it.
Phil
That's
is
it.
a big fan of Toronto jazz.
He hates jazz when it's in any American city, but if you put it in Toronto, he's all for it.
Right. So this episode is actually before Wit left town,
Yeah.
but obviously Hal Smith is dead. He is not in this episode. This was already written, I suppose, to some degree, and they rewrote it to accommodate Eugene and Bernard in kind of the wit role that he was supposed to have.
This is episode number 263, originally aired on April 9 of 1994.
Yep.
And this is an Edwin Blaggard episode.
Yes.
Remember Edwin Blaggard?
We love Edwin
And
Blaggard.
I do, actually.
Yeah. So, yeah, this episode only has men in it. It is an all-male cast, and for some reason...
Finally!
This happens... So, yeah, Connie's not here, and this happens for some reason in a few Edwin Blaggard-centric episodes. And I wonder why. Oh, what's that?
I think I know why.
What is that, Marge?
He prefers the company of men.
I see. Who doesn't?
We do.
We sure do.
No, so this episode kicks off with Rusty. Hey, remember Rusty? The
bone
bully?
of Wrath.
The bone of Wrath.
Oh, there were all sorts of comments also about being soft or being a bone earlier
Love
as
that.
well that I didn't quite.
That.
Yeah, got a bone down.
But I guess WIT has set up some sort of an incentive program where if you do well on a test, you get a free ice cream sundae.
Yeah, sure.
But it's implied, here's the strange thing. It's implied that you only get this if you were expected to not do well on the test.
Yeah, or if you already were, because
this is like a performance improvement plan.
He gets a free sundae for getting a B on a test. And
Right.
Eugene says it's for, and the word he ends up choosing is problem students, but he starts out saying something else, and I don't know if he was going to say the R word. I think it started with a D, and so maybe he was supposed to say delayed.
No, it's delinquent.
Delinquent?
He was going to say delinquents.
Why wouldn't he just say delinquent? Why would that be something he wouldn't say?
Because he was afraid that Rusty would leap across the counter and stab him.
So WIT has instituted a nanny state program. For these juvenile
an
delinquents.
sort of society.
Yeah,
exactly.
Wit saw Book It and saw it was teaming up with Pizza Hut, which was woke. And he didn't want kids reading more books, but he did want them getting better grades.
Free ice cream is a useful incentive in this situation.
Yeah.
And so this is basically going to be our A plot. Well, it's really more the B plot. Again, this introduces the B plot.
They
before
always do
introduce
the B
A
plot first.
B plot is basically going to be that we've got Sam, who remembers our goody two shoes, and Rusty, who's the bad boy.
Yeah.
There is once again homoerotic tension here, and Sam just wants to be bad.
But sometimes that isn't so good.
Sometimes not.
In order to get Butch back, like I think that's
no, because
the through line?
this because we listened to this out of order. This is before the Butch episode.
Oh,
yeah. So he's hanging out. So he's not hanging out with Butch anymore because he turned into a bad kid. But he is hanging out with Rusty Gordon, who is also a bone of wrath.
Which, like, also like Sam is pretty incorruptible in the Butch episode, but then in this one he's very easily swayed to do bad things.
Oh, yeah. But God just won't let him do it, which is kind of a fun plot, but it doesn't go anywhere.
It's
again.
Windows made of unbreakable glass.
So that's our B plot. Our A plot is that Edwin Blaggard, who is our flamboyant man of the stage,
He prefers the company of men.
is being subjected to a surprise inspection from, I guess, the Odyssey Department of Buildings. I don't know.
It's the health inspector. It's the health inspector.
Yeah.
And here is our health inspector.
Ah, Mr. Inspector. Have you finished probing, prodding, scratching, and crawling around my theater?
I have, and I'm afraid the news isn't good.
It isn't?
It isn't? It isn't. You know, city bylaws state that theaters must meet the same health and safety requirements as restaurants.
They must?
They must? They must. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to
not
cite
funny.
you for some violations.
No.
32 to be exact.
32?
32? 32.
The Donovan House.
The Donovan House. The Donovan House.
I actually once worked at a Papa John's that failed 2 consecutive health inspections.
Oh, shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
What happened?
It became a Domino's.
I think that one time it was because our refrigerator temperature was too low.
Bad.
And then the second time there was some issue with like surfaces being dirty. I don't know why I explained that. That's probably not going to be very
I guess what I'm wondering is like,
listeners.
what happened next? Were they subject to a shutdown or something?
No, they just inspected us a third time and then we passed. It
okay.
seems like there were some very lax regulations involved, unlike in this episode.
Yeah,
I like to
Odyssey.
imagine. Yeah, I like to imagine that in Odyssey at some point there was some kind of like horrific dinner theater accident that now like requires all theaters to have the same health codes as restaurants. Like somebody got E. coli.
Yeah, well, Donna attended a dinner theater and it just burst into flames.
Right, exactly.
She can't walk into a building without it burning to the ground.
Because Edwin is not in compliance, he needs to ameliorate those problems promptly, right? And he's not happy about it. He's not happy about it at all.
That little joke where they say the same thing 3 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They do that a 4th time in that scene.
Yes, the famous rule of force.
I just couldn't get it in the clip because it was way too long doing the whole scene. But
I do love listening to interviews with Lawler where he talks about the finer points of comedy, and it does make me want to tear my skin off of my body. He's just so bad at it.
Yeah.
But the thing that saves him in this episode is that Earl Bowen can do no wrong.
Yeah.
And can turn even the worst joke into a laugh line.
So this scene also started with him getting a letter from Regis that we only get in like the implication. The actual letter was apparently written but cut from the episode smartly. But Regis is making a lot of money in Europe. He's still doing great, while Edwin struggles to keep his theater afloat, of course. He is rehearsing apparently a production of Shadowlands, the play about C.S. Lewis, as we hear from the dialogue towards the end.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So he is advertising the show by going on Shock Radio, Odyssey's #1 radio host, Brian Dern, which is just Corey Burton doing an impression of California shock jock, one of Brian Quimby's least favorite men in the world, Tom Lakis.
Yes.
And so Edwin gets on here, and then this whole thing just turns into a rant against municipal regulations.
I mean, let's face it, this town ain't exactly a thriving cultural center, you know.
No, it isn't.
And it's gonna cost a lot to operate a theater.
Oh, you have no idea.
I don't know how you stay open.
Well, it would be a whole lot easier if the city didn't saddle me with useless rules and regulations.
That's right.
City Hall got their claws dug in you?
Oh, yes. With a ludicrous law that requires my theater conform to restaurant health and safety standards.
It's a dinner theater. Making you do that.
Yes, can you believe
make
it?
Food.
They've cited me for 32 violations. 32!
Wow. Well, that's gotta be a record.
And they want me to put in some ridiculous sprinkler system.
Unbelievable.
And it turns out in this very right-wing town of Odyssey, people do love their big business and they hate their big government. So it turns out the phone lines are lighting up like a goddamn Christmas tree.
Oh, every small business tyrant is calling
People are
right?
like, this homosexual is onto something. Finally, something for me.
Brian, how do you know that he's a homosexual?
Oh, well.
He prefers the company of men.
Great, thank you.
I still don't really know how Phil Lawler and Paul McCusker and the gang write a character like Walter Shakespeare, who is absolutely the life partner of Edwin Blackard and Sub, and don't realize that that's what they've written.
Or Secret Dom.
Duke of Burgundy situation.
Like, I think obviously a very, very fun voice for Edwin Shakespeare. And sorry, not Edwin Shakespeare. Edwin Blackard and his partner Walter Shakespeare.
When they get married in the
when they get married,
then he'll be Edwin Shakespeare.
Yeah, they could do a gay an Odyssey episode about somebody refusing to have a gay wedding, but then they would need to acknowledge that gay people exist.
Yeah,
which
this happens. This does happen. In 2014.
Oh, wow.
Just look up The Ties That Bind, parts 1 through 14.
Oh, the ties that bind. You know, you get bound with ties. you have your theater is poked and prodded.
Probing, prodding, scratching, and crawling around.
Oh, I forgot about probing.
When binds aren't so tied. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once these small business tyrants and libertarians call into Brian Dern's show, at this point, Edwin starts going off on like city work, right? And how lazy they are and how much they suck. And this gets Rusty very upset.
Edwin Blackard on the Crying Brian Dern show.
Oh, yeah. My dad told me about him. He talks about Odyssey, right?
He does more than talk. He badmouths city workers, and he makes me mad.
Why?
'Cause my dad's a city worker, that's why. Would you like it if someone badmouthed your dad?
You did one time.
Did you like it?
No.
Well, neither do I.
This good performance. I like this kid.
That's not a bad bit, actually.
No, it's kind of funny.
I chortled at that.
It does bring some relief that you did find some comedy in this, Max, because
we really tortured you with this one.
We really put you through the ringer.
Would you say that I was probed?
I would say that. I would say that. Yes, and I apologize for that.
God, it's such a bummer.
I blame Brian.
It's such a bummer that Edwin became a libertarian. Like, it was inevitable, I guess.
Well,
only temporarily,
that's
right?
the way things were in the 90s. The libertarians were kind of, if you were aware of them, they seemed like they were offering the sensible path, because Clinton certainly wasn't pro-gay, and the libertarians just were all small government on everything. Smoke weed every day, get gay married, start your business, don't abide by any health codes at all. And that speaks his language, you know?
Have you read The Fountainhead? Here's a free copy of The Fountainhead.
And so Edwin, in that early 90s libertarian sensibility, continues to rail against other city workers, up to and including the volunteer fire department. And this is where he crosses a line.
This becomes like the most popular thing that has ever happened on Brian Dern's show. This is already the most popular radio show in town, but now Edwin is a regular, just going on every day of the week, doing Grinds My Gears. And the volunteer fire department really gets thrashed by Edwin Blackard. For no good reason at all.
Oh, yeah, I fucking hate volunteer firefighters.
But it's interesting.
Yeah, they should be paid.
It's interesting because in this, Edwin becomes a small government crank, and he's the bad guy.
Yeah, that is weird, isn't it?
Like, in the same way that Bernard, when he went on his road trip, and ended up in the jail next to that other dude who was like, yeah, don't pay your parking tickets. It's all a scheme for the Bilderberg group. Like, that is also seen as like, yeah, no, you went too far here. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can't be making, like, the health codes exist for a reason. The volunteer firefighters exist for a reason. The city allocates resources from your tax dollars for a reason.
Yeah, local government is okay, maybe, in the Odyssey universe.
Mm-hmm. Right, because there's your friends and neighbors.
Yeah, and, like, I wonder if this has anything to do with the fact, like, conservative shock jocks are also presumably, like, Odyssey and, like, Focus's direct competition. Yeah. So maybe they want to get in their shots on them a little bit.
Yeah. I was really surprised that Edwin at no point screamed about how they were turning the freaking frogs gay.
It's sort of like the internecine fighting between like left liberal podcasters and like hard left podcasters. Yeah. Of course, in Odyssey, things have to come home to roost at some point, and that's exactly what happens. Sam, in order to resolve his B plot, has decided to try to break a window. He fails to do so because the glass is smash-proof, I guess. And Bernard gives him a very rude awakening about, how bad it is to do these kinds of things.
But being right all the time doesn't get me praise from teachers and free ice cream sundaes from Wits End.
So what?
Huh?
You heard me, so what? Sam, doing good is its own reward, and I got news for you. It always pays off. Sometimes in ways you can't see. In fact, most times in ways you can't see. But it always does, because doing what's right pleases God. And that's the most important thing now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think this would play out differently in a modern episode. Because what Whit has done as the God Emperor of this town is he has created a perverse incentive in his economy. Right?
Sure.
He has created an incentive to do poorly and then do better. And then that way you'll get your free sundae.
As opposed to consistent excellence, yeah.
It reminds me a lot of like the old email forward, which is like the wizened old college professor told his students that they were going to be graded communistly, where no matter their performance, everyone would get the average of all the scores of everyone in the class, and then all the students do bad after that. This is literally just like shit like that. Wit is doing a grade welfare state to think about like all the Christian or right-wing entertainment that's being propped up by like, I just listened to the QAA episode about the Tuttle Twins cartoon and how capitalism offers all of the proper incentives because it's actually, based on your performance and it's based on your goodness. And then every once in a while you can choose to do charity if you want to, but by evening the playing field at all, by offering those incentives to low performers, you are just going to end up destroying everything from underneath. And to have Bernard Walton, small business tyrant, just be like, no, sometimes you have to do good, is almost a breath of fresh air.
Oh, well, I will just say briefly that after listening to 3 Eugene-less episodes, it was kind of nice to hear from Eugene again. I've grown weirdly fond of him over the course of my sort of second-hand engagement with Odyssey. If I had to pick a favorite character, I don't know. I'm kind of rooting for the guy.
Yeah, we all love Eugene.
I mean, my favorite character in Odyssey is, in fact, Edwin Blackguard, and he sure does get his comeuppance in this episode.
So AJ, you're saying you like Edwin better than maybe some of the female characters on the show?
I certainly some of them, sure.
Interesting. So Josh, would you agree with me in thinking that AJ might...
He prefers the company of men.
Do you think that
I would say
descriptive?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's true, Brian.
I mean, it is. it is just factually true.
Well, let's go ahead real quick then and wrap up the rest of this episode. So after Sam gets his lesson, it's time for Edwin to learn his. And the way that they pull the A plot and the B plot together here is that Rusty...
They actually do pull it together, which is rare for this show.
Yeah.
Rusty heads over to the theater to lob some cherry bombs into the rehearsal space.
Meanwhile, the volunteer firefighters are protesting outside.
They're picketing, which is great. And this causes the theater to catch fire.
I was actually really surprised. That the firefighters did not burn down the theater, because that's what would actually happen.
Right. No, but the volunteer firefighters and the people who work for the city are the good guys. They're good guys.
Well, protesters are the good guys.
Especially a volunteer firefighter, because I guess, they're very virtuous. It's very virtuous to be a volunteer firefighter.
Yeah, all those paid firefighters are in the pocket of the deep state. You know, you really can't trust those professionals.
But these working men, they come in because Sam is like, oh no, firefighters, and they put out the fire. It's not too serious of damage, I guess, to the rest of the theater, but Edwin still has to put in that sprinkler system, which was one of the things he was cited for at the beginning. There's some decent plot machinery here.
He really should have a sprinkler system.
He should. Yeah, he needs to have a sprinkler system. What if a local youth burns a building down? They seem to be doing that lately.
Yeah.
Often.
Yeah. What if they bring an oil lantern into your building?
That's right. These are the questions that I'm always asking. And I'm curious to hear, Max, like, the way that they tied this together at the end here, the way that our favorite writer, Phil Lawler, tied this all together. Were you surprised at like the relative level of competence here? Like, what were your big takeaways for this ending?
Yeah, I definitely did. I was like, oh wow, they actually like paid off the sprinkler thing from earlier. I thought that was just like a weird, because I remember listening to the beginning and being like, but he should have sprinklers. That's not like actually an overreach. Yeah. And then it turns out that in the end, the episode actually does agree with me on that. And it's interesting how like he has the whole Edwin has the whole conversation with Cry and Brian, like, oh, like, I have the right to say whatever I want. And then Brian is like, well, they have the right to protest. And I'm just like, I'm shocked to hear that on an Odyssey episode. And I guess this just sort of like predates that element of the culture war. It like wasn't as prominent then, or maybe just because they're volunteer firefighters and not the dreaded college students.
It's partly because it's the 90s, and the 90s really flattened politics as far as like the government's role in things. Most of the people in power were in agreement, whether they were in the and even the culture war started to flatten, right? Like there were very vociferously anti-gay policies enacted by the Clinton administration in particular.
Right.
And so the politics of 1995 and 1994, when these episodes come out, are more about, Christian values and whatever kind of boogeyman that they have on the TV at that time,
prayer in schools.
rather than any structural thing they want to build up or any structural thing that they want to tear down.
Yeah.
Perhaps a big inflatable dog.
So at the end of this episode, Sam gets a sundae anyway. Bernard buys him a sundae. Just like the old lady, Mrs. Erskine, apologizes at the end of the George Barkley episode and everything ends up fine. We learned the lesson that sometimes you just have to do good because it's good. Yeah, you'll get a sundae anyway. Fuck it.
Yep.
Yeah. Honestly, though, like, compared to the morals of the other episodes, at least it's like internally... Like, that actually is more or less in line with Christian values. Like, oh, you shouldn't do good because you'll be rewarded for it. You should do good because it's the right thing to do, and that's what God wants you to do. Whereas the rest of the episodes, it's kind of like, feels like a little bit of a shrug. Like the Butch one being like, actually, if you think somebody seems like a bad person at first glance, it's because they are.
Because they suck. It's just because they fucking suck, dude.
Big piece of shit.
Well, and of course, you have written quite a bit on the topic of troubled youths and troubled young people.
Yeah, I suppose I have.
And so that's why I was so excited to show you these episodes before having re-listened to them and regretting so seriously that I put this all into a batch.
I mean, that actually leads to, I think, a very interesting question, which is, like, what does it mean to be a bad kid? And what do we do with bad kids? Obviously, in your case, Max, you're dealing with some kids who have done, have screwed up a little, perhaps done some whoopsies.
A light whoopsie. Yeah.
And I think that the way that you handle it is just like it like the whole question of the piece, I think, is the title, which is what happens next. Like, what do you do? How do we as a society deal with like these particularly heinous crimes, and then how do they deal with forgiving themselves for doing those heinous crimes? But I mean, what would your solution be to somebody who gets up to all these japes? Like, how do we as a society rehabilitate these kids?
It's funny. This is a question that, like, I always find very tough to answer. The sort of like, well, what do we do instead of like that kind of carceral punishment logic? Yeah. And it's sort of like, the reason that it's a difficult question to answer is because, like, it depends. A lot depends. But, like, I guess it's less like what exact course of action should be taken in every particular case, and more like, how can we reframe the mindset of, like, how can we reframe people's mindset away from, like, punishment as justice, and think, like, what would actually, like, benefit the people in this situation? What would actually, like, leave everybody better off at the end? Because, like, punishment and justice are, like, treated as and understood as the same thing, but they're really not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody, like, robs your store, and then the person who has robbed your store or whatever, like, goes to prison, that's not, like, actually any, like, meaningful kind of restitution. And part of the point of the comic is just, like, those kind that kind of mindset, like, doesn't really, like, it doesn't benefit everybody. It just makes everybody more miserable. And part of the reason the internet is sort of involved is, like, the internet is, like, this weird microcosm for that kind of logic of, like, oh, if you do something or say something bad on the internet, like, people are going to bring it up forever until you're dead. And it's like, oh, you're just a fundamentally bad person because you fucked up. Which, like, obviously, like, people do bad things that they should be held accountable for, but also, like, people don't really, when they're punished for bad behavior, it doesn't really, like, fix them or make them good people. If anything, a lot of the time it'll, like, cause them to dig their heels in. And the punishment doesn't benefit the victim either.
Right.
Like, they might, like, feel a little better about it, but it doesn't actually change what's happened or change the circumstances of their life.
So what about Butch then? If we had to rehabilitate Butch?
Butch did nothing wrong.
Okay, good.
We will weigh that against the future episodes with Butch that we will be listening to in a couple months.
Well,
Max, we want to first of all just thank you so much for coming on our show. It's been a complete pleasure. If people are interested in hearing more from you, finding out about your work or whatever, what should they do?
You can follow me on Twitter or on Tumblr at Maximum Graves, or on Instagram, but I don't really use Instagram. I guess I also am on Blue Sky as Maximum Graves. The social media landscape in kind of a weird spot right now. And you can also check out my webcomic, What Happens Next. It's in my, like, pinned tweet on Twitter. There's a link to it in my Tumblr bio. The URL of the website is whathappensnext.webcomic.ws. And you can kind of familiarize yourself with my work that way. I also have a Patreon under the name Max Graves that people can subscribe to, much like one might subscribe to the Worst of All Possible Worlds Patreon, as I had historically done. They might do that.
They could.
I'm not going to say they will or they won't. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be invited on, and it's so great to talk to you guys. You know, long-time fan, long-time listener, first-time caller.
First-time caller, absolutely.
I just want to heap a little bit of praise on What Happens Next.
We're all going to heap praise on it.
An incredibly dark, dense, and fast-paced.
Yeah.
A very addictive comic.
Yes.
It just races you through it, and then you're like, wait a second, which person was that? I have to go back a few pages, and it really rewards continual and critical engagement of it.
Yes.
And I just think it's fantastic, and I was geeking out over having you on this episode today.
I really appreciate that.
I think all three of us were, like, I had to, when I read it for the first time, I had to Google if Griffin was a real person, because it felt so authentic and lived in, and I just assumed it had to be based on a real thing that happened. Like, these characters feel like they are real, authentic people. And it is such an empathetic work that does not shy away from showing the warts and all of these characters, that I think is so rare, and especially rare in somebody as young as you are, Max. Like, I can't I can't tell you how blown away I am that you have been able to accomplish this and so young. I can't wait to see the long and promising career you've got ahead of you because it's fucking gangbusters, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, as everybody knows, I'm 22 years old and one iPad tall.
Also, of course, if you would like more of our show, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, we too have a Patreon, $5 a month, or sometimes $10 if you want to hear even more.
$5 gets you 2 premium episodes a month. It also gets you access to our monthly installment, Fancy Movie Time. This month, we will be releasing an episode about David Lynch's Mulholland Drive.
Ooh.
And next month will be a double feature of Luis Buñuel films.
Oh, God.
We're really going to rake in the money next month.
They're fancy movies. We are not bullshitting you.
And of course, for $10 a month, you also get access to Lads Cast, which is the unscripted show where we just shoot the shit about whatever is on our mind, share our experiences, and things of that nature. So patreon.com/worstofall is that link. Check it out. Check out all of Max's stuff. And AJ, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I just want to say that if you're ever looking to be a bad kid in Odyssey, well, I have the exact place you should go, and that's right on down to the Donovan House. The Donovan House? The Donovan House. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And it seems that Max's cat also agrees. You gotta. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. See you next time.